The young man reflects on his fate, realizing this is the end for him. He remembers how the doctor told him about his incurable heart disease, giving him only 3 years to live. With no chance of survival, he knew the next heart attack would be his last. He quit his job and devoted himself fully to his hobby, playing the VR MMO Broken Balance Online. Because of his illness, his reflexes weren't as sharp as others, but his deep knowledge of the game set him apart, making him one of the top players. That knowledge was the key that allowed him and his team to finally defeat a boss thought to be unbeatable for 3 years. Weakened and aware of his end, he wished he could have lived longer. With heavy eyes, he looked at the messages from his friends, worried about his silence. Summoning his last strength, he typed a final farewell. Thanks for everything until now. As his body collapsed, he prayed for peace in the afterlife. But instead of darkness, he opened his eyes to find himself waking up in an unfamiliar bed, shocked to realize he was still alive. Memories from his past life flooded his mind, from birth to the very end. Realizing what happened, he understood that he had been reincarnated into another world, carrying all the memories of his previous life with him. He sorted out his situation and realized his new identity was Eld, the fourth son of a lower noble family living in the countryside. Ignored and treated as if he didn't exist, he was seen as an unwanted child. The only one who acknowledged him was his eldest brother, Light, who treated him kindly, unlike the rest of the family. He recalled how the family blamed him for years of poor harvests after his birth, treating him as if cursed. The only reason he hadn't been expelled yet was because he was still a minor. But with his 15th birthday and coming-of-age ceremony the next day, he knew he would be cast out under the pretense of independence. Still, he felt little worry about it. Looking around at the village, he realized this new world bore a striking resemblance to Broken Balance Online, the very game he had devoted his life to mastering. He noticed that this world shared the same systems as Broken Balance Online: magic, skills, and jobs. Unlike Earth's professions, these were fantasy roles such as mages and swordsmen. Even the skills matched exactly, like a swordsman's spinning slash or a mage's magic ball, just as in the game he once played. He confirmed that the skills in this world were identical to those in Broken Balance Online, just as he had seen from his brothers. His own job, however, was Novice, the weakest class, meant for those without a proper role. Still, even novices possess some skills, and his first was Self-Cure. He tested his first skill, Self-Cure, a basic recovery spell even novices could use. Realizing he could wield it, confirmed that this world operated under the same system as Broken Balance Online. Yet, unlike him, the people here knew almost nothing about magic or skills, a crucial difference between this world and the game. Although Self-Cure was a simple, low-cost spell, he noticed no one else used it. Instead, people relied on rubbing unknown herbs to treat injuries. Remembering how potion making existed in BBO but was rarely used, he realized this gap in knowledge might actually turn into an advantage for him. He realized that being expelled from his noble house could actually benefit him. With his knowledge of BBO, he was confident he could grow stronger and carve his own path. More than that, he now had what it took to survive in this world. On the eve of his coming-of-age ceremony, Eld's elder brother asked if he was prepared. Eld admitted he was ready, but then revealed his decision to forego the ceremony altogether, leaving his brother shocked. His brother assumed cost was the reason, but Eld clarified that money wasn't the issue. He simply didn't want the ceremony. Normally, upon turning 15, one would receive a blessing from the village priest during the coming-of-age ritual, which granted them their job. This was one of the 2 known ways to change jobs. He recalled that once a job was obtained, it became permanent, regardless of how it was acquired. The common method through the coming-of-age ceremony was simple but flawed. One couldn't choose their job, and the results were usually weak and basic. However, there was another path, changing jobs at the Cathedral of the royal capital, which granted far superior roles compared to the basic ones. Eld was determined to leave the village without undergoing the coming-of-age ceremony, even if it meant remaining a novice forever. After considering it carefully, he asked his older brother to inform their father of his decision. Though hesitant, his brother agreed to speak on his behalf. Early in the morning, Eld's father, Geld, came to his room after months of silence between them. Sternly, he ordered Eld to get up, dress, and prepare to leave the house immediately. Geld tossed Eld's belongings at him, reminding him of his choice to refuse the ceremony. With a cruel satisfaction, he said this was the first time Eld had done something useful for the family by leaving. Without hesitation, he ordered Eld to get out immediately. Eld left the house with nothing but a worn sword and 10,000 gills, receiving no farewell from his family. Reflecting that the currency here matched Earth's yen, he accepted his situation. Just as he was about to go, his eldest brother Light appeared, the only one to acknowledge him. Eld decided to head to a neighboring town and register as an adventurer, even if only as a novice. Light pointed out it would have been wiser to change jobs first, but Eld explained that knowing swordsmanship was enough to qualify. Understanding his resolve, Light handed him 100,000 gills, advising him to use it carefully until he could support himself. Eld smiled, grateful to have such a caring brother. Though he appreciated the offer, he declined the money, saying his 10,000 gills were enough to get by until he found work. He promised to do his best so that he would never need to rely on it, while Light assured him the money would be there if he ever did. With firm resolve, Eld walked out of the village gates, his brother watching him leave from behind. Stepping onto the open road, he began his new journey toward the unknown future that awaited him. Eld set his sights on reaching a city with an adventurers guild, knowing they could guide him toward the capital. For now, his priority was to get there safely. Armed with only a worn sword, he hoped he wouldn't encounter any monsters along the way. As he traveled through the forest, Eld quickly encountered a wolf emerging from the shadows. Realizing trouble had found him sooner than expected, he braced himself for the fight ahead. Eld noted the weakness of a novice's scouting ability. If he could see an enemy, the enemy could see him too. Luckily, the creature before him was only a wolf, one of the weakest monsters from BBO. Even so, since this was his first real battle in this world, he couldn't afford to drop his guard. As the wolf charged, Eld steadied himself, recalling the sensation of sword combat from BBO. More than just game mechanics, it was his own honed player skills that mattered. By focusing and applying the observational techniques he had mastered in the game, he prepared to face the beast head-on. Eld clashed with the wolf, relying on his experience and focus. With a decisive strike, he proved that even a level 1 novice could take down the beast, landing a clean blow that ended the fight. His strike triggered critical hit correction, a system from BBO that boosted his sword's power when landing a perfect blow. Realizing this confirmed the world's mechanics matched the game, he concluded that all the techniques he had mastered in BBO would be effective here as well. Eld was surprised by how naturally his body moved, allowing him to land a critical hit on his first attempt. Remembering that consistently landing such strikes marked one as an expert in BBO, he realized his experience gave him a strong advantage. If this world truly followed the same system, then his skills could carry him far. Eld began skinning the wolf, recalling how in BBO, this system was often criticized as unpleasant and unnecessary, though it allowed players to harvest materials for equipment. Remembering the developer's solution, he decided to use the auto-skinning skill, simplifying the process just as it worked in the game. Eld tested the system further, noticing that auto-skinning didn't fully function as it did in the game. Using the cleanse skill, he purified the materials, finding it quite useful. Though the mechanics were strikingly similar to BBO, he realized there were still slight differences in this world's system. Eld arrived at the town of Ilia, passing through its gates with determination, ready to begin the next stage of his journey. Eld entered Ilia and took in the busy streets filled with merchants and townsfolk. While looking for the guild, he was approached by a man who noticed him wandering, and Eld asked for directions. The man quickly understood Eld's situation, recognizing him as a noble's son cast out to try his hand at adventuring. Noticing his poor equipment, he remarked that it seemed like his family had sent him off hoping he wouldn't survive. Acknowledging the truth behind those words, Eld listened as the man offered him advice. The man advised Eld to stop speaking so formally, explaining that adventurers avoided such language to prevent thieves or enemies from easily identifying leaders. He warned that if Eld continued like that, others would mock him for not even knowing the basics of adventuring. Eld adjusted his speech as advised, earning the man's approval before being pointed toward the guild. Reflecting on it, he realized the man was right. Adventurers never carried themselves with formal speech, not even when addressing lords. Eld finally arrived at the guild, gazing up at the large building with determination as he prepared to take his first real step into the life of an adventurer. Eld stepped into the Ilia branch of the Adventurers Guild, pushing open the large doors and looking around as he prepared to begin his registration. Inside the guild, Eld studied the world map and realized the capital was located across the sea on another continent. Though the journey would be troublesome, it wasn't too far. For now, his objective was to find a ship bound for the capital, while checking what kind of requests the guild had available in the meantime. Eld checked the guild's request board, using it to learn about the monsters in the area. He was surprised to find that a wolf-slaying request was ranked as C rank, the third highest of 6 levels. Knowing how weak wolves were in his game knowledge, he realized something was off with how this world classified threats. Eld examined lower-ranked requests showing creatures like wild boars, kick rabbits, and bite rats, monsters that looked far weaker than wolves. Confused, he realized these monsters didn't exist in BBO, or were ranked much lower there. Unsure of this world's standards, he questioned whether the wolf he fought was truly the same as the one now considered a top-tier threat. Eld approached the guild counter to sell the wolf materials he had collected. There, he was greeted by the smiling receptionist, Teresa, who welcomed him warmly and asked about the items he brought. Eld admitted he wasn't sure which monster the fangs belonged to, explaining he was just a beginner. Teresa told him that was normal for newcomers, but reminded him how dangerous it was to fight without knowing one's enemy. She explained that monster parts sold based on their usefulness, so the fangs could be traded without needing to be a registered adventurer. Eld placed the wolf fangs on the counter, surprising Teresa, who questioned if he truly obtained them himself. She explained that while some people sell materials bought elsewhere, doing so without an official request wouldn't count as an achievement in the guild records, warning him not to lie about their origin. Eld realized the monster he defeated was classified as a C-rank wolf. Surprised, he wondered if it had been weaker than usual, but Teresa clarified that the strength of monsters within the same species doesn't differ much. She also noted the fangs he presented looked too clean to have come from a freshly defeated beast, raising her suspicions further. Eld prioritized securing funds and asked about selling the wolf's fangs. Though it wouldn't count as an achievement, Teresa offered him 34,000 gils due to their clean condition. After deducting the 5,000 gil exam fee for guild registration, Eld received 29,000 gils and agreed to register immediately, preparing to take the exam. Teresa asked Eld about his job before the exam. He admitted to being a novice, and though she reminded him that the exam fee wouldn't be refunded if he failed, he still accepted the terms and prepared to proceed. Eld learned that the guild wouldn't reject his application but required him to take an exam. However, all exam options demanded job-exclusive skills, making it impossible for someone with the novice class, which had none, to pass under normal circumstances. Eld realized his only viable option for the guild exam was a one-on-one battle against a swordsman examiner. Though the task was extremely difficult for a beginner like him, with low stats and no combat skills, he decided to try anyway, knowing the worst outcome would just be losing the exam fee. Eld chose the one-on-one battle exam, and Teresa guided him through the process. After preparing, she led him to the training area where the test would be conducted. He decides to face the test with all his might, having accepted the challenge. He asks only to avoid serious injuries. The examiner confidently takes his sword and assures him that, as a professional, he will leave him with only minor injuries, demonstrating his intention to not go easy. Eld prepared for the exam match. Though allowed to use his own sword, he chose a wooden one instead, while the examiner confidently dismissed his chances of landing a hit. Eld chose a wooden sword, preferring its lightness and practicality for a non-lethal match. With his weapon in hand, he prepared himself as the examiner confirmed they were ready to begin. With both participants prepared, the match was set to begin. The guild receptionist stepped in as the referee, asking if they were ready before signaling the start of the exam battle. Both fighters signaled their readiness, and with the referee's call, the Adventurers Guild admission exam officially began. As the fight began, Eld analyzed his opponent. He knew the examiner was far stronger, but also realized that sword techniques left a brief window of vulnerability. His best chance to win would be to exploit that opening. When a skill was used, Eld realized that if the examiner relied only on raw strength and avoided using skills, he would stand no chance. As the fight started, the examiner charged at him with overwhelming force, ready to crush him head-on. Eld analyzed his opponent's movements, realizing a direct defense would guarantee defeat. Anticipating a downward strike, he prepared to evade with a subtle step, aiming to turn the attack to his advantage. The examiner launched a powerful guard crush, aiming to shatter Eld's defense with brute force. However, Eld realized that this reckless move left his opponent vulnerable, giving him the perfect chance to counter while avoiding the strike. Eld narrowly avoided the crushing blow, realizing the examiner had intentionally left an opening. It was a test. If Eld couldn't seize such an obvious chance for a critical strike, he wasn't worthy of passing the exam. Eld manages to land a decisive blow, sending the instructor to the ground. The receptionist quickly halts the match, declaring it over. Relieved, Eld wonders if he passed, believing the instructor had gone easy on him during the test. The instructor, shocked at being defeated by a novice without the use of any skills, chooses to play along and accept the result. Eld realizes that the man is pretending to the very end to maintain appearances, and he gratefully acknowledges the instructor's kindness, seeing him as a genuinely good person. Eld successfully passes the test, surprising the instructor with his swordsmanship. When asked about his training, he claims to be self-taught, though in reality, his skills come from countless hours spent practicing and analyzing techniques within a game in his past life. That experience allowed him to refine his style endlessly without fatigue or injury, making him highly skilled in the real world. Eld humbly credits his win to the instructor going easy on him, though he suspects the man intentionally used guard crush to create an opening. Amused, Eld interprets the instructor's denial as dedication to maintaining appearances, thinking to himself that this level of commitment is impressive. Eld successfully passes the Adventurers Guild admission exam and officially becomes a member. He receives his guild card, which lists his name and starting rank of F. Holding the card, he acknowledges his new status, while the receptionist offers to explain the guild's guidelines. The receptionist explains the Adventurers Guild rules to Eld. There are 3 main ones: never submit false reports, don't reveal confidential client information, and always obey the laws of the country where you work. Breaking these rules leads to punishments that depend on the violation, ranging from suspension to being permanently banned, with criminal acts judged by the country's laws. Eld learns that the 3 core rules are the only mandatory ones to follow, but the punishments for breaking them can be extremely severe, even resulting in death. Curious, he asks about emergencies, recalling how the game he knew forced players to take urgent quests. However, the receptionist clarifies that in this world, adventurers aren't forced to accept any request, not even during emergencies. Eld listens as the receptionist explains the system of request deadlines and penalties. Each request has a set time limit, and failing to report completion within that period counts as incomplete. Penalties involve paying a fee, with more urgent requests carrying higher fines, stressing the importance of timely reporting. Eld finishes hearing the guild's rules and receives a copy of the guidelines. The receptionist reminds him that even if a request is completed, failing to report it on time will mark it as incomplete. With everything clarified, Eld decides it's time to gather more information and asks if the guild has bestiaries or fighting manuals available. Eld asks for the bestiary and combat manuals commonly used by adventurers. The receptionist explains that he can consult them within the guild, but must either copy or purchase them if he wants to keep the information. She then selects the most useful books for adventuring in the area and presents them to him. Eld begins examining the bestiary of monsters around Ilia. He notices that the F-rank section is filled with creatures he has never seen before, such as the kicking rabbit, biting rat, and sand mole. As he continues flipping through, he realizes that the F and D ranks are also filled with unfamiliar monsters. Eld is shocked to see common creatures like wolves, scorpions, and vampire bats listed as C-rank monsters in the bestiary, since they are usually considered weak. Even more surprising, he discovers that rage wolves are ranked as B rank, a classification much higher than he expected. This makes him question if all adventurers in this world are much stronger by default. Eld checks the section on A-rank monsters and finds it blank, relieved that there are no powerful threats nearby. He then moves on to the Adventurer's Combat Manual, which ranges from basic to advanced levels. The guide covers weapon handling, magic use, positioning, dungeon exploration, and equipment maintenance, but Eld quickly notes that much of the beginner and basic content is knowledge he already has. Eld flips through the advanced section of the combat manual, finding only basic advice on handling multiple enemies and enemy attacks. Disappointed by the lack of detailed one-on-one strategies, he suddenly notices a section describing a rare phenomenon called Miracle Strike, where an attack's power multiplies unexpectedly. This discovery catches his full attention. Eldo learns that even the world's strongest adventurer, Gillart, can only achieve a Miracle Strike about 20% of the time. Shocked, he realizes that the people of this world might not know the proper technique to land consistent critical hits. Remembering his own knowledge, he recalls that the key is to relax the hands slightly at the moment of impact, something that could give him a huge advantage here. Eld realizes that if adventurers don't even know the basics of critical hits, then a 20% success rate makes sense. Still, this makes him question the reliability of the bestiary and manuals, which seemed overly simplistic. When asked if the books were helpful, he politely thanks Teresa instead of voicing his doubts. Before leaving, he asks her how to reach the royal capital, surprising her with the question. Teresa explains that Eld must head to the coastal city of Miniton to take a ferry to the capital, though the public fare costs a steep 3 million gills, as most seats are reserved for guild members and officials. Alternatives include working for a major company, gaining noble connections, or securing a high-ranking guild job. Eld dismisses those options, deciding it's better to save the money, while Teresa jokingly suggests he could just swim across the sea. Eld decides to stay in Ilia for now, aiming to earn money and learn more about fighting monsters before heading to the coastal city of Miniton. At the guild, he asks for a beginner-friendly request. Teresa confirms he can accept it even as an F rank and recommends an E rank request for him to take on. Teresa offers Eld an E-rank request with unusually high rewards, explaining it's nearly as difficult as a D-rank task. Eld, cautious about overreaching, refuses and asks for a standard F-rank request instead. Though Teresa points out he defeated the instructor, Eld insists it was only because of luck and the instructor going easy on him. Teresa is shocked when Eld mentions using a miracle strike, explaining that the exam is designed to make novices fail, and no instructor would ever go easy. To her, performing a miracle strike, even by luck, marks someone as an expert. Eld, still thinking it's just a trick anyone could pull off, is confused. Teresa, convinced of his skill, quickly offers him a new request. Teresa tries to hand Eld a C-rank quest to hunt lesser wolves, but he realizes she might be setting him up for something too dangerous. Deciding to play it safe, he picks his own request instead, an F-rank mission to hunt kicking rabbits, which pays 1,500 gils each. Teresa accepts his choice and proceeds to process the request. Teresa processes Eld's request, explaining that the mission will take place in Ilia's second forest, which is filled only with kicking rabbits, making it relatively safe. Still, she warns him to prepare well, as one can never be too careful. Eld agrees and asks for directions to the forest, relieved that she finally gave him a proper request without pushing him into something too dangerous. Eld leaves the guild after receiving his first request and is spotted by the instructor. The man jokingly calls him the strongest novice and asks if he's heading for a mission. Eld clarifies that he accepted a request to hunt kicking rabbits in Ilia's second forest, while wondering where that exaggerated title came from. Eld explains that he chose the simple request to hunt kicking rabbits in Ilia's second forest because it was considered safe. The instructor acknowledges his choice, wishing him good luck, and Eld accepts the encouragement, knowing he'll need it. Eld steps into the forest, reminding himself that kicking rabbits, despite their appearance, are dangerous foes that novices must never underestimate. Eld makes his way through the dense trees and observes his surroundings carefully, realizing he has arrived at Ilia's second forest. As Eld explores the forest, he notices movement and wonders if it's a kicking rabbit. But as he looks closer, he realizes the creature resembles a wolf, raising suspicion that something isn't right. From the shadows of the forest, a pack of wolves emerges, their presence undeniable. Eld realizes with shock that it wasn't a rabbit at all. It was truly a group of lesser wolves. Eld braces himself as the wolves charge, feigning a direct confrontation. At the last moment, he swiftly dodges their attack, narrowly avoiding their fangs while preparing for his counter. Eld strikes with precision, cutting down one of the wolves. The beast collapses to the ground lifelessly, while the others remain tense, circling him cautiously. Eld swiftly executes his plan, cutting down the first wolf and immediately following with another strike to defeat the second. He stays sharp and ready, standing firm as the fallen beasts hit the ground. Eld takes advantage of the wolves breaking formation, recalling the rule of isolating one-on-one fights when facing multiple enemies. He moves swiftly, striking down another wolf before they can regroup. Eld, with determination, delivers a decisive strike, cutting down the final wolf and finishing the battle. Eld's eyes widen in shock as he spots a mysterious armored woman standing confidently with her sword, radiating an overwhelming presence. Eld wonders if this world has a level-up system, and decides to test his strength. He picks up a stone, channels power into it, and uses his skill, Reinforced Stone Throw, unleashing it with glowing energy. Eld tests his Reinforced Stone Throw, smashing through a boulder with ease. Realizing he can now use skills unavailable before, he confirms this world has a level-up system. Satisfied with registering at the guild and leveling up on his first day, he decides to head back. Eld returns to the guild carrying the corpse of a lesser wolf, questioning if this is what they considered a kicking rabbit. The receptionist is shocked, noting that lesser wolves shouldn't even exist in that forest. Eld questions the existence of the kicking rabbit forest, claiming it's his first time hearing of it. The receptionist realizes he must have gone to Ilia's second forest instead, where he defeated a lesser wolf. Eld downplays it, saying this mistake caused him to fail the request and asks if it can be cancelled, while inwardly playing dumb to cover up his real ability. A surprised receptionist pretends it was a mix-up and processes Eld's hunt as a lesser wolf request. Eld admits to defeating 6 of them, and she happily rewards him with 120,000 gils in total, though he's clearly annoyed by her playful attitude. Eld is relieved after receiving the payment, realizing that defeating wolves earned him much more than kicking rabbits would have. He acknowledges Teresa's kindness, believing she ensured he got the best outcome. Feeling grateful, he asks if more lesser wolf requests will be available tomorrow, and she confirms enthusiastically. The next day, Eld goes to a weapons shop. The blacksmith greets him and asks what he's looking for. Eld replies that he wants a short sword that fits his physique and begins to examine the available options. Eld inspected the swords in the shop, knowing that a good weapon was essential for future requests and to balance his lack of stats. Unsatisfied with the available options, he asked for something better. The shopkeeper then presented him with a pricier sword, allowing Eld to test its weight and feel. Eld found a sword that felt perfect for him and decided to purchase it, confident it would withstand battles without breaking. Though satisfied with his choice, he realized he was now nearly broke and would need to earn more money soon. Eld returned to the guild and learned there were still 32 lesser wolf hunting requests available. He realized that while he could hunt as many as he wanted, the rewards would only cover the number of remaining requests, making it inefficient to hunt beyond that limit. Eld decided that completing 32 wolf hunts would only take him about 2 hours, so he might as well take another request to avoid wasting time later. Considering his strength, which he judged to be at the top of UB rank, he aimed to choose a task he could handle reliably alongside the wolf hunt. Eld selected an additional request, hunting spearmice, ranked E, with a reward of 4,000 gills each. The receptionist agreed it was a fitting task for him, and after securing the request, he set off confidently to begin his missions. Eld successfully completed the request to hunt lesser wolves, and, with confidence, prepared to move on to his next mission, eliminating spearmice. Eld arrived at the spearmice forest, noticing it looked different from what Teresa had described, with visibility being poorer than expected. Eld spotted a spearmouse, confirming he was in the correct hunting ground, and prepared to take down his first target. As Eld approached, the spearmouse suddenly let out a loud, piercing cry, startling him. The forest around him rustled, signaling that more creatures were quickly closing in. Eld realized the spearmouse's cries were a signal, summoning not just a few but dozens more. Surrounded by the growing noise, he quickly dashed forward, determined to take out as many as possible before they could group up. Eld quickly realized that while the spearmice were weak individually, their overwhelming numbers made them his worst possible opponents. Eld braced himself, relying on sheer skill to make up for his lack of stats, knowing that facing so many enemies at once meant he was bound to take hits. With no other choice, he charged into the swarm of spearmice. Eld fought fiercely, cutting down several spearmice, but the swarm's relentless attacks managed to wound him, forcing him to endure the pain while surrounded. Eld, despite being outnumbered, steadied himself with confidence. He believed skill could carry him through, focusing on continuously cutting down enemies one after another. To him, persistence and precision were the key parts of battle. Eld used self-cure to heal, carefully managing his limited mana. He reminded himself to stay calm, focused, and precise, knowing that every single decision in battle mattered. Amid the swarm of spearmice, Eld fought with determination, cutting them down while focusing on timing his heals carefully. His strategy was simple: defeat enemies relentlessly and recover only when absolutely necessary. Eld returned to the guild with a massive pile of spearmice corpses, totaling 276 kills. The receptionist was shocked by his feat, while Eld questioned her earlier claim that it was the perfect request for him, suspecting her of deliberately downplaying the danger. Back at the guild, Eld questioned if spearmice normally moved in such massive packs. The receptionist explained they usually gathered but never in the hundreds. While checking the materials, she suddenly realized one item came from a military spearmouse, suggesting Eld had unknowingly faced a far more dangerous variant. The receptionist clarified that military spearmice were entirely different from regular ones, classified as C-rank monsters instead of E-rank. She explained that facing them alone was nearly suicidal, though their materials sold for a high price. Despite this, Eld couldn't count them toward his original request, leaving the situation complicated. Eld decided to sell all the military spearmice he had defeated. Since they were high C-rank monsters, the guild offered 20,000 gills per kill, and he received a hefty reward, leaving him stunned by the large payout. Eld received a platinum coin as his reward, valued at 1 million gills. The guild warned him not to display it in the city to avoid attracting thieves, though they reassured him the area was safe and that he could likely handle trouble if it arose. Eld prepared to leave for the royal capital with his reward, aiming to improve himself as an adventurer. Though the guild regretted losing such a strong adventurer, he promised he might return one day when he felt like it. As Eld prepared to leave, the guild receptionist hurriedly stopped him, bowing in apology for lying about the kicking rabbit request. She confessed her fault, but Eld calmly told her not to worry, only advising her not to deceive others in the future. Eld told the receptionist he didn't want others to hold a grudge against her. Hearing this, she smiled warmly and agreed, feeling relieved by his words. Eld bid farewell at the city gates, stepping forward with determination. Looking ahead at the distant view, he set his sights on his next destination, the port town. Eld arrived at Port Town Minatan, a lively coastal city filled with bustling streets, tall buildings, and ships docked at the harbor, signaling the start of his next journey. Eld explored Port Town Miniton, asking about ferry tickets to the royal capital. He learned they could be bought at the Maxia company, though the cost was extremely high, around 3 million. Despite the steep price, he prepared to move forward. Eld arrived at the Grand Maxia company, amazed by its massive size. Approaching the ferry counter for the royal capital, he requested passage but was immediately asked if he had a letter of introduction. When he answered no, the situation became complicated. Eldo told the ferry ticket to the royal capital would cost 3 million gils. Without hesitation, he produced the exact amount, surprising the clerk. Mistaken for an important adventurer, Eld humbly denied it, claiming he was just a nobody. The clerk, impressed, proceeded to arrange his boarding. Eld asked to board as soon as possible, and the clerk informed him of a ship departing in half an hour. Eld accepted without hesitation, and arrangements were made right away as the grand vessel prepared to set sail. On board the ship, Eld reflected that it would take 3 hours to reach the royal capital. As he leaned against the railing, a sudden buzzing sound caught his attention, and he noticed something unusual approaching. Eld noticed a glowing stone called the Water Travel Stone, an ancient relic used to pilot the ship. Nearby, a group of women struggled with mixing ingredients for alchemy, failing despite following the recipe. Observing them, Eld quietly thought about the importance of mixing in the process. Eld overheard the women struggling with their alchemy and mentioned the pale green spirit medicine. Surprised, they questioned what he just said, unsure if he was correct. Eld repeated his words with confidence, while they looked at him in shock, wondering if he truly knew the right answer. The women, shocked by Eld's knowledge, nervously asked if he actually knew how to mix the medicine, clearly hoping he might succeed where they had failed. Eld admitted he knew how to mix the medicine and offered to do it. The woman, eager for the potion, promised to pay any price he named. Testing her, Eld asked for 10 million gils, which she accepted without hesitation, leaving him stunned at how much wealth she must have. 10 minutes later, Eld successfully finished mixing the potion. The noblewoman gratefully received it, relieved to finally have what she needed. Eld felt satisfied that he managed to prepare it without issues, but he couldn't help but wonder about the true identity of this mysterious woman. Eld completed the potion using a rare sacred tree leaf, an extremely valuable ingredient. Grateful, the noblewoman rewarded him generously, even more than agreed, acknowledging he had made enough for 2 bottles. Instead of adding more money, she offered him a special token as further thanks. Eld received a seal of appreciation from the Maxia company, a symbol of trust that certifies his reliability when shown in their stores or within the capital. Surprised by its importance, he questioned the gesture, but the woman reassured him, explaining that as the company's chairman, it was natural for her to extend such recognition to someone she deemed trustworthy. The woman introduced herself as Mina Maxia, the chairman of the Maxia company, the organization responsible for operating the ship Eld was traveling on. Eld was surprised to receive recognition directly from the chairman of the Maxia company, realizing how important she was. He introduced himself and they exchanged farewells, both expressing hope to meet again in the future. While on the ship, Eld noticed movement in the water. He pointed it out, realizing that something unknown was rapidly approaching them. The ship sailed steadily across the sea. Eld noted that the vessel was built to withstand monster attacks, though caution was still necessary. Mina decided to have the situation checked, and her mate obeyed immediately. Crew members then used their telescopes to scout the waters, and one of them reacted with shock at what he saw. The crew spotted a massive sea dragon emerging from the waves, charging directly toward the ship. Panic spread as they realized the creature was far from its natural habitat, over 500 kilometers away, leaving everyone shocked and unprepared for the sudden threat. Eld assessed the danger, realizing the sea dragon was far stronger than most creatures, using its spear-like arms to pierce enemies. He knew that if someone inexperienced took a hit, they would be defeated instantly. Meanwhile, Mina quickly organized the crew, calling for all fighters to gather, and urging the others to take refuge inside, while warning that the ship wasn't built to withstand an attack from such a monster. Eld noticed the sea dragon was targeting the ship's mast. If the mast broke, the water-traveling stone would be lost, causing the ship to sink. With no other options available, Eld realized there was only one choice left to confront the threat directly. Eld gathered the passengers and asked if anyone could perform long-ranged attacks. A small group stepped forward, 3 mages and 2 archers. Though the number was limited, Eld resolved to work with what they had to face the threat. Eld asked if anyone could protect the mast from the sea dragon's attacks, but no one stepped forward. Mina explained that it was an A-rank monster, one rarely ever defeated. Realizing the situation, Eld decided to take on the responsibility himself. Eld prepared himself at the edge of the ship, watching as the sea dragon approached. As it drew closer, he signaled the others. The archers and mages quickly readied their attacks, aiming at the beast as it came into range. The archers released their arrows while the mages unleashed powerful spells, striking the sea dragon head-on. Explosions shook the waters, smoke rising as the creature was engulfed in the combined assault. The group watched tensely, waiting to see the results of their attack. The sea dragon emerged from the smoke, seemingly unshaken, causing panic among the group who feared their attacks had failed. Eld, however, noticed the damage inflicted and urged them to continue, assuring that their strikes were effective and the monster was weakening. The group continued their assault, confident that constant pressure would eventually bring the sea dragon down. Eld, however, realized the real problem wasn't their damage output. As the battle raged, the sea dragon stirred the ocean, creating a massive whirlpool, revealing the true danger they were facing. The sea dragon erupted from the ocean with overwhelming force, towering above the ship and drenching everything in its wake. Eld steadied himself, eyes sharp and determined, bracing for the monster's incoming assault. Eld timed his strike to match the sea dragon's attack, focusing his energy into a precise counter. With a powerful swing, he unleashed a critical counter, clashing directly against the beast's force and creating a massive impact. Eld successfully deflected the sea dragon's massive speararm strike with his critical counter. The force of his technique astonished everyone watching, proving that even a novice could repel such a powerful monster with the right skill. The crew is stunned as Eld deflects the sea dragon's powerful strike with just his sword, questioning who he really is. Eld remains focused, aware that his life is on the line, but notices the dragon's attacks are predictable. He realizes that by repeatedly using his critical counter, he can fend off all of the monster's speararm strikes. The mages quickly resume their assault under Mina's command, bombarding the sea dragon with continuous spells. Explosions strike the beast, but it glares back with furious, glowing eyes, showing no intention of retreating. The sea dragon rises from the water, thrusting its spear-like arms toward the ship's deck where the adventurers stand ready. Eld charges forward with determination, his eyes locked on the beast as he prepares to intercept its ferocious attack. Eld clashes directly with the sea dragon, blocking one of its massive spear-like arms. However, a second arm strikes at the same time, forcing him into a desperate defense. Struggling under the pressure, he narrowly avoids being pierced, realizing that handling two simultaneous attacks is beyond his limit. Relieved to have dodged, he acknowledges just how close the strike came. Eld reflects on the precision required for his counterattacks, knowing a single mistake in timing or angle would spell failure. His focus sharpens as he pushes the thought aside, determined to finish the fight before the mast is destroyed. The sea dragon is relentlessly bombarded by continued attacks, its body reeling from the blows. Eld steadies himself, convinced victory is close as the creature shows signs of weakening. The sea dragon suddenly lost its balance and redirected its strike toward the passengers. Eld noticed immediately, but the attack was already flying toward Mina and her group. Just as the impact was about to land, someone rushed in to shield her from the blow, leaving Mina stunned in fear and shock. Eld swiftly blocked the redirected strike, standing firm in front of Mina and the others. His precise defense left everyone stunned, especially Mina, who looked at him with relief. With calm resolve, Eld assured them that protecting them was simply part of what he set out to do. With determination, Eld announced that the battle was nearing its end, and urged everyone to finish the fight. The mages and archers responded with resolve, readying their spells and arrows to deliver the final strike against the sea dragon. The sea dragon collapsed beside the ship, finally defeated. Relief and joy spread among the passengers and crew as they celebrated their survival. Gratitude was expressed to all who fought, especially toward Eld, who was hailed as the mysterious and powerful swordsman that led them to victory. As the crew searched for him to give thanks, Eld quietly slipped away from the crowd, not wanting to attract attention or stand out too much, especially among guild staff and nobles. He found a secluded spot on the ship to rest and let out a sigh of relief. Eld admitted he didn't want to attract attention, as he had important matters awaiting him in the capital. Mina smiled, understanding his stance, but reminded him that his actions had saved many lives that day, including her own. Mina, with determination in her eyes, swore upon her name that she would repay the debt she owed. Eld responded with a calm smile, saying he would be waiting for it. As their words settled, the ship sailed steadily across the open sea. While Eld's ship continued its voyage safely, a group of cloaked figures observed from the shore. One was shocked to hear the sea dragon had been defeated, but another dismissed it as a minor setback. With a confident grin, he declared that for their group, the Garden of Despair, this was only the beginning. Eld stood at the ship's railing, watching as the sails carried them closer to their destination. The crew announced that they were nearing the royal capital and asked everyone to prepare for disembarkation. As the city came into view beyond the cliffs, Eld gazed at it with determination, thinking to himself that at last he had finally arrived. As the ship approached the grand gates of the royal capital, Eld's eyes fixed on the city ahead. With resolve burning inside him, he thought of his true goal. This was the place where he would undergo his job change and become a sage. Eld arrived at the capital and spotted the old cathedral, its walls marked with the portrait of Jaius, the god of jobs. Though the place seemed abandoned, he knew its importance. As long as the Cathedral of Jaius existed, he could change jobs. With determination, he confirmed that this was the place he had been searching for. Eld considered sneaking into the cathedral ruins, believing it to be the place for job changes. However, Mina revealed that the building he was eyeing was just an old, abandoned church. The true royal capital cathedral still stood elsewhere, maintained and active. Eld finally arrived at the royal capital's cathedral, a massive and imposing structure. However, he quickly noticed something strange. Unlike the ruins he had seen before, this cathedral lacked the portrait of Jaius, the god of jobs. Doubt struck him as he questioned whether job changes could truly be performed there. Eld asked if it was all right to enter the ruins without permission, and Mina assured him that it was. She explained that while they could be entered freely, there was a chance they might be used as a bandit hideout. Eld admitted he'd rather not push his luck too far, though Mina remarked that even if bandits were there, they likely wouldn't pose much of a threat to him. Mina was shocked to learn Eld was only ranked F. She offered to use her guild connections to raise his rank immediately, insisting he didn't seem inexperienced. Eld, however, refused, saying a high rank would be meaningless without proper experience. Reflecting on his earlier battle, he confirmed that people in this world could indeed use the same skills as in BBO. Eld reflected on his situation, realizing that while people here could use skills like in BBO, they lacked proper combat ability. Skills alone weren't enough. Stats also played a crucial role. He admitted that even if the sea dragon stood still for hours, his low attack power wouldn't have been enough to defeat it. Acknowledging his limits, he decided that as a novice, he shouldn't advance to a higher rank just yet. Eld prepared to sneak into the cathedral ruins, thanking Mina for the information. She warned him to be careful and told him to reach out if he ever needed help. As the ship docked, Eld smiled and reassured her he'd keep that in mind. Mina responded with a playful gesture, while the crew disembarked onto the port. Meanwhile, others on the ship wondered where the mysterious swordsman had gone, questioning if he had even been real. Eld arrived at the bustling royal capital, taking in the lively atmosphere compared to the smaller towns he had seen before. Later, at an inn, he sat to rest and reflect on his next move. He wanted to change jobs as soon as possible, but hesitated. Knowing there was a chance of bandits hiding in the ruins, he decided it would be risky to go during the day when he could easily be spotted. Eld reasoned that the best time to sneak into the ruins would be around 3 in the morning, when people were least alert. Deciding to conserve his energy until then, he lay down on the bed, planning to rest for a while. Eld realized he hadn't eaten since boarding the ship, and felt his hunger catch up to him. Deciding he had some time to spare, he left the inn to find food. He headed toward a restaurant called Salama to grab a meal before nightfall. Eld walked through the lively streets, passing rowdy men drinking and laughing loudly. He eventually stopped in front of a noisy bar. Though it didn't seem like the safest place, he decided it would do for a meal and stepped inside, where he was greeted by the bustling atmosphere and a welcoming staff. Inside the crowded restaurant, Eld was told he'd need to share a table. He agreed and sat down, noticing the meal the woman in front of him was eating. The food looked appetizing, so he simply ordered the same dish. The waitress confirmed his choice, calling it a cheeky burger, and went to prepare it. Eld enjoyed his meal, thinking it was really good, when suddenly a loud commotion erupted nearby. A rough-looking man with an eye patch stormed into the restaurant, yelling angrily at the staff. He demanded why seats hadn't been reserved for his party, and shouted about being a card holder, his presence immediately drawing everyone's attention. The man argued with the waitress, demanding special treatment, but she firmly explained that reservations weren't possible, and he'd need to wait until his party arrived. Frustrated, he shouted about the lack of empty seats, then gave a sly grin as he realized what she meant. Someone would have to vacate a seat. With heavy steps, he began moving deeper into the restaurant, his intentions clear, while others watched in unease. The man with the eye patch stood before the protagonist, looking down intimidatingly. Bluntly, he demanded that he stand up, ordering him to leave his seat immediately. The protagonist, however, remained calm and firm, staring him down without showing any fear at the provocation. The hero, however, merely sighed, finding the situation uncomfortable. Irritated by the lack of reaction, the brute approached and shouted, demanding an answer, while the protagonist remained calm, observing him indifferently. The man with the eye patch continues to insist that Eld leave his seat, telling him he must get up immediately. Eld, on the other hand, remains calm, reminding him that he should just wait for his companions to arrive, just like everyone else. He realizes the man isn't there to talk, and, unfazed, returns to eating, advising him to calm down and be patient. Eld continues eating calmly, enjoying his meal without feeling uneasy. He thought he would have finished eating by the time the man with the eye patches group arrives. While he remains calm and praises the food, the man in front of him can't stand the indifference, his anger growing. Feeling humiliated, he prepares to attack Eld, unable to accept being ignored. The man with the eye patch raised his sword high, ready to bring it down on Eld, who remained seated at the table, calm and composed. Eld observed him without fear, realizing how reckless and unskilled his opponent was. The man swung his blade downward with brute force, while Eld noted the poor stance and lack of technique behind the attack. The man with the eye patch lunged forward with his sword, aiming to kill Eld in a fit of rage. Eld swiftly raised his own blade, blocking the attack with ease. The clash of steel left the attacker stunned, unable to believe his strike was stopped so effortlessly. As the confrontation drew the attention of everyone in the tavern, the crowd watched in shock at Eld's composed defense against the reckless assault. Eld countered the attack effortlessly, using nothing but a fork in his hand. The technique, precise and calculated, deflected the blow as if it were nothing. The man with the eye patch froze in disbelief, his confidence shattered as he realized his strike had been stopped by a simple eating utensil. The sight left him stunned, unable to comprehend Eld's overwhelming skill and composure. Eld quickly seized the man's wrist, twisting it with controlled precision. The thug panicked, unable to break free as pain shot through his arm. Calmly, Eld explained that this was only self-defense, reminding him that he had been the one to attack first. Channeling a skill to boost his strength, Eld tightened his hold, showing that he could easily snap the man's arm if he wished. The threat was clear, his calm gaze contrasting the thug's terrified expression. Eld restrained the thug with ease, twisting his arm and holding him in place. He reminded the man of his reckless behavior for drawing a weapon in a bar, warning him he was lucky it hadn't gone further. The thug, sweating and furious, shouted back in disbelief, while Eld remained calm and dismissive, making it clear who truly held control of the situation. The thug, desperate and furious, bragged about his status with a powerful company, threatening to ruin Eld's life. Eld, however, remained calm and unfazed, showing no fear in the face of the man's intimidation. Eld questioned the meaning of a bronze card, and it was explained that such a card is awarded to adventurers recognized by a company, symbolizing their fame. This reminded him of a card Mina had given him, which looked quite similar. The thug laughed arrogantly, boasting that the Zionese company wouldn't forgive Eld for crossing him. Eld calmly revealed that he also carried a card, pulling it out to show. The thug froze in shock upon realizing it wasn't just any card, but the same bronze card he had been bragging about. The thug fell into shock upon realizing Eld's card wasn't bronze but gold, and from the prestigious Maxia company. The revelation stunned the entire bar, drawing everyone's attention. Eld looked at the card, questioning if it was really such a big deal, while others affirmed its significance, recalling how he had even deflected a sword with just a fork. The man with the eye patch collapses to his knees, begging for his life and offering everything he has. The protagonist watches in confusion, unsure why the card he revealed carries such overwhelming weight. Observers whisper among themselves, realizing that if he holds the Maxia company's gold card, he cannot be an ordinary person. Many note they've never seen him before, but agree that anyone with such status is far from a nobody. Meanwhile, others remark that anyone foolish enough to pick a fight with someone holding a gold card is already doomed. The protagonist realizes the situation has escalated beyond his expectations and decides to put his card away. Suddenly, guards rush in, demanding to know who caused the disturbance. To everyone's surprise, the man with the eye patch frantically admits he was the attacker and begs to be arrested, pleading for them to take him to jail immediately. The protagonist, bewildered, wonders who even called the guards in the first place. The guards arrest the man with the eye patch and take him away, leaving the protagonist reflecting on how much attention he drew. Deciding to settle his bill quickly and leave, he tries to slip away quietly. Just then, a grateful woman approaches him, expressing her thanks. The protagonist reassures the woman, saying it was nothing, though inwardly he admits he only acted to protect himself. Still, he feels a bit of satisfaction from being thanked. After leaving the place, he notes that they gave him the meal for free along with a coupon for his next visit. After finishing his meal, the protagonist reflects that there's still time left. He walks back through the city streets, deciding to rest his body until the moment he has planned arrives. The young man lies awake in bed, unable to sleep from excitement about leaving behind his novice class. Though restless, resting his body through the night has given him enough energy. With determination in his eyes, he rises, puts on his gear, and prepares himself, ready to face the day ahead. He steps outside into the quiet streets, the town asleep under the night sky. After confirming the silence, he raises his hand to his face and activates a skill, his expression sharp with focus. His eyes glow as night vision activates, turning the darkness into clear sight. The empty streets and buildings become visible in detail. Knowing few possess this ability, he moves confidently through the silent town, climbing higher until he overlooks the city under the starry sky. He hears faint voices and notices activity near a small, worn church. Taking cover by the wall, he observes carefully, aware that its dwellers are still awake. Cautious, he grips his weapon, hoping to avoid unnecessary conflict. He enters the quiet church and notices voices coming from below. Remembering that certain churches hide job change chambers underground, he makes his way through the interior and down a staircase, stopping before a sealed door in the basement. Inside the basement, he spots several men gathered and realizes the situation is more complicated than expected. The door is secured with a lock, making direct entry risky. Assessing the building from outside, he decides that forcing his way in would only cause trouble. He notices a well beside the church and recalls that such wells often serve as hidden entrances. With a confident look, he grabs the rope and descends into it, using it as a discreet path to the basement. He reaches the hidden chamber connected to the well, finding a sturdy wooden door. Confident this path will lead him inside, he pushes it open carefully, ready to proceed. He realizes entering directly would expose him, so he decides to create a distraction. Drawing his sword, he strikes the door loudly, using the noise to divert attention away from his position. The loud strike alerts the men inside, drawing their attention away. Seizing the chance, he quickly climbs up the well, determined not to waste any time. He leaps down the well, activating a landing skill to absorb the impact. Landing smoothly on the ground, he steadies himself and faces the door ahead, ready to continue his infiltration. Shouts echo above as others scramble to secure the area, but he remains calm at the bottom of the well. Deciding it's safe to proceed, he enters through a door and finds himself in a storage room filled with crates and supplies. Opening a crate, he discovers packets of drugs, recognizing them as contraband, tied to a past organization that spread chaos. Realizing this must be a source of funding for the group, he debates destroying it, but decides it's not the right moment to act. As he opens a door, he unexpectedly comes face to face with a guard. Shocked, the man shouts, alerting the others. Soon, multiple enemies rush down the corridor, realizing an intruder has slipped inside. The men shout for his death and charge at him without hesitation. Realizing the danger, he bolts down the hallway, desperate to shake them off and locate the job change room as quickly as possible. Running through the corridor, he spots a door marked by a familiar portrait and rushes inside. Slamming it shut behind him, he enters a chamber where a statue of a serene goddess stands, confirming he has reached the job change room. Inside the room, relief washes over him as he confirms it's the place for a job change. Hearing pursuers close in, he quickly pushes a shelf to block the entrance, creating a barrier to buy himself some time. Before the statue, he prepares for the job change ritual. This place allows one to gain any profession through blessing or chant. He recalls a legendary class master of all forms of magic, from healing to devastating attacks. It was a job so powerful it shattered the game's balance, standing above every other profession. He holds the glowing orb and calls for the job of sage. Light engulfs him, his body surrounded by radiant energy as the ritual takes effect, marking the start of his transformation. As the glow fades, he looks at his hand in awe, feeling a power he never experienced before. Unlike in the game, the sensation is real, and he realizes this is what truly changing jobs feels like. Now transformed, he unleashes a powerful spell, blasting through the wall with ease. Dust and rubble scatter as he steps into the open space. Nearby enemies, alarmed by the noise, rush to investigate, realizing he's moved into the adjacent warehouse. Using his new powers, he casts a spell to suspend himself mid-air and swiftly ascends the well. Emerging outside, he looks down at the church grounds, having successfully escaped the underground chamber. He hovers under the moonlight as the confused men search below, unable to find him. With his goal accomplished, he turns away from the church, leaving swiftly and at ease, ready to move forward. Just as he prepares to leave, a blade suddenly hurtles toward him. He narrowly dodges, startled, only to see a figure emerge, impressed by his reflexes and ready to confront him. A cloaked man approaches, praising his infiltration and diversion with a calm, menacing tone. The young man notices the crest on his chest and realizes he belongs to the feared organization known as the Garden of Despair. The Garden of Despair is revealed as a shadowy organization shrouded in mystery, its purpose and structure unknown. Their only clear goal is the destruction of human society. Among all the evil groups in existence, they stand out as the most dangerous and feared. The cloaked man questions how he knows their name, noting even internal cases like the Sea Dragon incident are tightly hidden. The young man, though bluffing to probe for information, realizes he struck a nerve and successfully confirmed their involvement. The cloaked man recalls reports of a swordsman with a worn blade who saved a ship from sinking and suspects it was him. He then makes a bold offer, inviting him to join their organization instead of opposing it. The man introduces himself as Brasis, a leader of the Garden of Despair, and promises wealth, women, or anything desired in exchange for loyalty. Though wary, the young man realizes that pretending to accept might be his safest option, giving him a chance to uncover their true motives despite his current low level. He firmly refuses the offer, stating he has no interest in the organization. Brasis presses further, tempting him with money and the thrill of killing, but his words turn dark as he lunges forward with a sudden attack. Brasis hurls another blade at him with deadly precision. Startled, he reacts just in time, dodging the projectile by a hair's breadth, narrowly avoiding a fatal strike. He steadies himself after dodging, realizing the first attack was only a diversion. Determined, he declares he has never killed before, but is ready to start with this fight. Charging forward, he prepares to strike, while Brasis grins menacingly, revealing clawed weapons and eager for battle. The two clash fiercely, blades and claws meeting in rapid strikes. Sparks fly as the young man deflects a flurry of attacks, pressing forward with precision while Brasis counters aggressively, their battle intensifying with each exchange. Their weapons lock together, blades grinding as they push against each other. Brasis sneers at the weight of his opponent's sword, mocking him with a twisted grin while holding the clash firmly in place. He clashes again but is quickly overpowered, forced back despite using both hands on his sword. Shocked by the sheer strength of his opponent, he realizes from power alone that this man is on a completely different level. Brasis laughs maniacally, acknowledging his strength while spreading his arms wide with confidence. He declares that no matter how skilled his opponent may be, death will soon claim him. The young man quickly gathers power and unleashes a spell, hurling shards of earth forward in a barrage. The ground shatters violently as the clay bullets fly toward Brasis, catching him by surprise. Brasis charges forward, dodging the barrage with a sudden leap. Realization strikes him as he laughs, understanding why the young man's sword felt weak. He recognizes that his opponent was a mage all along. He rushes forward, gripping his sword tightly, and launching a direct strike. The enemy braces for the clash, and their blades collide with force, each testing the other's strength in close combat. In the midst of their clash, the young man shifts tactics, casting magic aimed at Brasis's leg. Caught off guard, Brasis realizes too late that the head-on assault was a feint, leaving him trapped and shocked by the unexpected move. Brasis struggles as his legs are bound by a sticky substance. Unable to move, the young man reveals it was a trap spell called Sticky Bomb, cleverly disguised as his earlier clay bullet. Using the cover of night, he had made it nearly impossible for his enemy to notice the difference until it was too late. Brasis struggles, violently pulling at the sticky substance holding him down, cursing in frustration. Suddenly, he freezes as his opponent calmly raises a glowing magic circle, preparing to unleash a powerful spell directly at him. The young man, smiling with calm confidence, channels his magic as light glows at his fingertip. Brasis, panicked and furious, screams in desperation, realizing the tables have completely turned against him. The young man launches a flame bomb, hitting Brasis squarely and engulfing him in raging flames. The man screams in pain as his body is consumed by the fire, unable to react. The protagonist coldly watches his enemy burn, keeping his hand raised and his gaze stern, showing no hesitation. Suddenly, Brazil's burned arm transforms into a monstrous claw covered in rocks. The protagonist watches in shock as the enemy advances, smashing the ground with brutal force and opening a huge crater of destruction around it. A monstrous creature emerges, its body altered by a forbidden drug, radiating menace. The young man watches from above, calm and prepared, analyzing the enemy before making his move. The enemy consumes a drug that transforms him into a monstrous being, trading intelligence and humanity for raw strength. Recognizing its origins from a dangerous organization, the young man prepares his magic, realizing he must fight with full power to stand a chance. The young man unleashes a powerful spell, conjuring a massive fiery arrow that shoots forward with destructive force, lighting up the battlefield. The transformed monster grabs hold of the fiery arrow, trying to resist its power, but is quickly overwhelmed as the flames explode violently in its grasp. The young man unleashes a follow-up attack, summoning 5 blazing arrows at once. The fiery projectiles rain down toward the transformed monster, overwhelming it with relentless power. The fiery assault leaves a massive crater where the enemy once stood. The young man observes the destruction calmly before leaping away, departing the battlefield under the night sky. The next day, the young man sits quietly in his room, reflecting on the battle. Relieved that no further attacks came after the night's fight, he acknowledges the need to grow stronger and be ready to face enemies like that again in the future. While walking through town, the young man thinks about the importance of equipment for a sage. He recalls how staves greatly boost magic power, making a huge difference in combat. Remembering the battle against the sea dragon, he notes how victory was possible because everyone had been properly equipped. He explores the capital, impressed by the variety of weapons available in its shops. However, he realizes that all the staves on display are designed for wizards, leaving him without a proper staff suited for a sage. He learns that while sages can wield many types of staves, unlocking their true potential requires one crafted specifically for them. Realizing this, he begins to wonder where he can obtain a sage's staff as soon as possible. Eld meets a cheerful girl again, who warmly greets him despite only a day having passed since their last encounter. She kindly offers her help, ready to assist him with whatever he might need. Eld reflects on how powerful his card is, granting him VIP treatment everywhere he goes, from shops to even bars. After spending the morning searching, he finally explains to the girl that what he's truly looking for is a staff. Eld clarifies that he is no longer a swordsman, but a sage, a class fully centered on magic. He demonstrates his abilities with simple spells, admitting that with a sword he's no stronger than a novice. The girl, surprised, learns that the sage job is purely magic-based, and unlike anything she has heard before. Eld explains that his swordsmanship against the sea dragon was something even a novice could achieve with enough practice. Despite his display, he reminds her that his true class is sage. Impressed but still doubtful, she admits it feels wasteful for someone so skilled to pursue magic instead of swordsmanship. Still, she agrees to show him the best staves available, acknowledging his determination. Eld steps into a weapon room filled with staves and is stunned by their quality, recognizing them as first-rate items. However, he quickly realizes a problem. Despite their excellence, none of them are suited for a sage like him. Eld's attention is drawn to a particular staff among the collection. Despite being told it's an ancient artifact but considered the worst staff available, he decides to take it without hesitation. Ellsworth lifts the staff and immediately senses how perfectly it fits him, realizing it was truly meant for sages. What others dismissed as useless is revealed to be a top-tier staff, misunderstood only because wizards had tried to wield it. Eld is shocked to learn the staff costs 25 million gil. With only a 150,000 gil sword as his alternative, the girl surprises him by offering 30 million gil for his sword instead. However, what she truly wants is the membership number from the back of his guild card. Eld learns that the girl isn't forcing him into anything but wants his guild membership number. In return, she offers him a staff and explains that requests can only be directed to a specific adventurer using that number. Though the tasks won't be mandatory, she promises generous rewards to make them worth accepting. Eld realizes she's willing to pay 30 million gil just for the ability to request him directly. The girl explains that 30 million gil is actually the standard rate for an A-rank adventurer, and she wants to secure his potential before others notice him. Eld understands that she's investing in him and decides to accept the offer. With a smile, he agrees, humbly acknowledging her trust, and takes his leave while asking for lenient requests. The girl smiles warmly, expressing her anticipation for the future. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the bustling streets of the city, with people going about their daily lives under the shadow of the grand castle towering above. Eld walks through the city streets, reflecting on the equipment and money he received from Mina. Though he acknowledges the benefits, he reminds himself not to take on the impossible. Suddenly, something catches his attention, making him stop and turn with a cautious look. Eld walks through the city with his newly obtained staff, when he suddenly senses an unusual presence. Realizing that someone is tailing him, he stays alert while scanning his surroundings carefully. Eld confronts the man tailing him, who reveals himself as a guild employee. The man explains he had been observing Eld since the ferry incident, impressed by his actions, and clarifies that his role is to scout strong adventurers for the guild. Eld listens, as the guild employee explains that the guild offers a formal subjugator position, one that provides high and stable rewards but requires great strength. Eld understands it as a civil servant-like role, but weighs the downside of constantly dealing with bothersome requests. The man insists Eld would be easily accepted due to his sharp perception, but Eld declines, preferring to remain independent. The guild scout, though disappointed, leaves the invitation open should Eld ever reconsider. Eld reflects on the differences between the game and this world. In the game, there was no formal subjugator position, and unclaimed requests didn't matter. Here, however, real people would be troubled if requests went unfulfilled. Accepting the reality, Eld decides he will focus only on handling the requests he can manage for now. Eld arrives at the request board, but is surprised to find very few postings. He suspects the regular subjugators are handling most of the work, leaving little behind. Curious, he approaches the counter to ask about the requests, where the receptionist welcomes his inquiry with a smile. Eld asks if there are any monster subjugation requests available, but the receptionist explains that most monsters are handled by the Royal Army during their training, leaving few tasks for others. Considering this, Eld thinks it might be better to move elsewhere. Before leaving, he asks if he can also register his job change at the guild, and the receptionist confirms with a smile, asking what job he switched to. Eld introduces himself as a sage, but the receptionist is confused, saying she has never heard of such a class. Eld realizes that in this world, only jobs from the coming-of-age ceremony are recognized. He recalls that to register a job in the guild, one must be certified by using a job jewel, which identifies classes like mage or warrior, though his unique class likely won't be recognized that way. Eld decides not to report his job change for the time being, thinking staying as a novice won't harm him. The receptionist mentions inferior jobs, though she admits not knowing much about them. Eld is surprised by the term, while she explains that some inferior jobs exist, like berserker or saint, but they are often weak, struggle in parties, and tend to quit midway. Eld recalls how, in BBO, jobs were divided into two categories, basic and superior. Basic jobs included roles like mages, swordsmen, archers, and healers, while superior jobs were more advanced ones, such as sages, heroes, saints, and berserkers. This distinction explains the confusion about his current class. Eld reflects on the differences between jobs in this world and in BBO. Here, superior jobs gained from the coming-of-age ceremony are seen as failures, unlike in BBO where they were considered successful. Since basic jobs level up faster by defeating the same number of monsters, superior jobs are viewed as burdens. Eld, however, reasons that superior job skills should be strong enough to make up for this, wondering why they are treated as inferior. Curious, he asks why the Saint class, despite its powerful healing abilities, is considered an inferior job. Eld is shocked when the guild clerk doesn't recognize the term Divine Heal, a skill he considers basic knowledge. Realizing that this world lacks awareness of even fundamental abilities, he grows frustrated and confused. Deciding it's safer for now, he concludes it's better to remain registered as a novice, though he internally questions how little people here truly know. Eld realizes there's no point in staying in the royal capital, since there are no requests available, so he decides to head to another city and try his luck there. Before leaving, he chooses to say goodbye and visits Mina, informing her that he plans to leave the capital. Eld shares his frustration about becoming an adventurer, only to find no subjugation requests in the capital. Mina explains that while the capital is peaceful and only has minor requests, someone like him would be wasted on such tasks. She stresses that powerful adventurers greatly impact the economy, recalling how Eld saved the Maxia company's ship, which carried many important figures, including herself. Eld wonders if the ship he saved was truly that important, and Mina explains that its loss would have thrown the entire country into chaos. When asked about his next destination, Eld says he chose Fiesta, since it's nearby and a good starting point. Mina agrees, assuring him he'll likely find plenty of requests there. While talking with Mina, Eld learns there is a notable subjugation request still available in the capital. It involves defeating a C-rank monster known as the Great Mole. Eld is surprised, realizing he has never heard of this creature before, and assumes it must be unique to this world. Mina explains that the Maxia company owns a field in the royal capital, smaller compared to the nation's main farmlands. Eld learns that the Great Moles appeared there, threatening the crops. Mina then requests him to defeat them, offering a reward of 500,000 gil for each one eliminated. Eld accepts the subjugation request, noting the high pay for the task. Mina explains that great moles are troublesome because they travel underground, making them difficult to handle. Eld agrees to see what he can do, and is instructed to grab the map and request form before leaving. Eld arrives at the outskirts of the royal capital, holding a map in hand. He looks toward the vast cityscape and towering castle, noting that the location he seeks should be somewhere nearby. Eld arrives at a vast farming region near the royal capital, surprised by its size compared to what he was told. Wondering why it had been described as small, He decides to seek clarification and heads to the farmhouse, knocking on the door to ask the manager. Eld meets a worker from the farmland management office and presents Mina's request form. The worker gratefully acknowledges his acceptance of the task. Eld then asks which of the fields belongs to the Maxia company, explaining he came to defeat the Great Moles. The worker explains that the Maxia company doesn't own just one field, but all the farmland in sight. Eld is shocked, realizing the vast scale of the area he'll have to cover to deal with the Great Moles. Eld wonders about the immense influence the Maxia company holds, given the size of their fields. Despite his doubts, he agrees to take on the task. He warns that he might not be able to keep the farmland intact, but the worker assures him it's fine as long as he avoids using fire magic. The farm worker offers to get help for Eld, worried about the difficulty of the task. Eld kneels down, placing his hand on the ground, and calmly assures her he can handle it alone. With confidence, he declares that the monsters will gather exactly where he stands. Eld crouches on the field, focusing as he presses his hand to the ground. The worker looks on in confusion, not understanding his actions. Moments later, energy pulses outward in circular waves as he activates a skill called Earthbait, designed to lure the monsters directly to him. Magical waves spread across the ground, forming a wide radius. Eld knows that underground monsters rely on sensing magical energy instead of sight. By using this, he can lure them to his position. Soon, the earth trembles with heavy rumbles as multiple presences approach. Eld stays calm, watching closely as the monsters begin to surface. Huge moles burst violently from the ground, tearing through the farmland as soil and crops scatter everywhere. Eld steadies his staff, realizing how much destruction these creatures cause just by surfacing. He calmly acknowledges the reason behind the request, preparing himself to face them head-on. Eld summons sharp ice pillars from the ground, towering spikes erupting around him. The massive moles surge forward, only to be pierced and stopped by the freezing onslaught. The farmland shakes under the impact as Eld stands firm, staff in hand, controlling the battlefield with precision. Eld stands among the frozen remains of the massive moles, their bodies impaled by towering ice pillars. The farmland around him is torn and shattered from the overwhelming magic. Facing the stunned woman, Eld admits he damaged the fields more than he planned, apologizing for the destruction his power caused. Eld reports back after finishing the request, submitting the completed subjugation of the Great Moles under Mina Maxia's name. He enters the room where Mina waits, and her attendant announces his arrival. Mina is surprised at how quickly he returned, asking if he forgot something, but Eld simply states that he has already completed the task. Mina, impressed, acknowledges how fast he managed to finish it. Mina is shocked to hear Eld already completed the request, exclaiming in disbelief since she thought there were only around 20 Great Moles. Eld calmly corrects her, explaining that there were actually 31 in total, and he made sure to defeat them all. He adds that he has already submitted his report to the guild. Mina, still stunned, asks how Eld managed to finish the request so quickly. Eld explains that he used a skill to lure the monsters, spreading magical bait to draw them out before defeating them. Mina is surprised that he can wield both a sword and magic, finding it unbelievable. Eld clarifies that he mainly relies on magic, keeping the sword only as a backup. With the request completed, he prepares to head to Fiesta, thanking Mina for the opportunity as she watches in awe, calling him a monster in admiration. Eld prepares to leave after completing the request, receiving words of encouragement for his travels. Soon after, he is presented with a massive payment of 20 million gil from the Maxia company as compensation for his service. Surprised by the amount, he reflects on how extraordinary the company's scale truly is. The payment is explained as an additional reward, leaving Eld quietly impressed while realizing just how influential the company is. Eld arrives at the town of Fiesta and heads toward the guild. He looks at the request board, noticing that while there aren't many requests available, at least some are posted, giving him work opportunities to pursue. Eld approaches the receptionist and asks if the lack of monsters is due to the town's closeness to the royal capital. He then mentions that even if he plans to move on to the next town, he'd still like to accept at least one request from here. Curious, he asks if it's possible to accept a request in one city, but report its completion in another. The receptionist confirms that as long as it's within the same country's guild system, and he brings the request form along with proof of subjugation, it will be accepted. Eld takes 2 subjugation requests, one for the weed mantis and another for the huge poison toad. The receptionist expresses relief that there are still requests available, though Eld is surprised to hear her say still. She explains that it's because Fiesta has 2 big names that usually handle most of the requests. An image of a large weapon emphasizes the reputation of these powerful figures. A warrior with long hair and a spear strapped to their back walks through a forest path. Sunlight filters through the trees as the narration reveals that everything has changed since the arrival of the adventurer known as Flamespear. Eld learns about the adventurer known as Flamespear, famed for great strength and recognized with a special nickname. With Gillert missing, Flamespear is now regarded as the strongest solo adventurer in the world. Eld reflects on this, impressed by Flamespear's reputation, while also realizing Gillert's disappearance is a serious matter. After finishing his business, he prepares to leave, keeping the information in mind. Eld walks into a quiet forest and decides it's the right place to proceed. He activates his magic search, releasing waves of energy that spread through the area. The skill scans the surroundings, and Eld's sharp gaze locks onto something as he senses movement or presence nearby. Eld locates a group of 10 weed mantises about a kilometer away. Assessing the situation, he prepares himself and activates his skill, cloaking his presence with magic invisibility as he advances toward them. Eld activates his concealment skill, magic invisibility. While it will fade once another spell is used, it allows him to move undetected and secure the first strike before his enemies notice him. He quietly advances through the forest, blending into his surroundings. Eld approaches the weed mantises undetected and channels his magic. Flames erupt, catching one off guard, and soon a blazing ring surrounds the group, trapping them inside his flame circle. The weed mantises are consumed by flames, leaving only charred remains behind. Eld confirms the request complete, reflecting on his method, using magic search to find targets, invisibility to approach, and offensive magic to finish them swiftly. He notes it as an efficient strategy for hunting multiple enemies alone. Eld hears a disturbance in the forest and quickly activates his magic search. He detects something unusual ahead and spots a large creature, signaling unexpected trouble nearby. Eld notices someone battling in the forest and realizes it's against an area boss. These bosses are powerful monsters that appear in specific cycles and grant large amounts of experience when defeated, making them valuable targets for leveling up. Eld uses his invisibility magic to approach unnoticed and assess the battle. He plans to step in and assist if the fighter struggles, knowing that even when area bosses are defeated by 2 people, they still grant a large amount of experience. A female warrior charges at the monster with her spear, but is struck back by its powerful attack, crashing to the ground. Eld, watching from nearby, reacts with concern as he prepares to intervene. A female adventurer warns Eld to leave while she continues fighting a massive beast. The monster, revealed as the Raging Ape, moves with surprising speed for its size. Eld recognizes it as a tougher opponent than even the Sea Dragon. Eld observes the female adventurer struggling against the Raging Ape and realizes his current skills aren't enough to win. Deciding to help, he resolves to use his skill points. He bypasses the usual church ritual for acquiring skills and directly learns new abilities, including Shadow Fog and Blood Poison. Eld finalizes his preparations, activating his newly acquired skills through commands like in BBO. He first launches a sticky bomb, creating an explosion to draw attention. Then he casts Magical Taunt, successfully redirecting the Raging Ape's focus onto himself. The Raging Ape charges at Eld, lured by the Magical Taunt spell. The adventurer watches in terror, unsure of what's happening, while Eld remains calm, certain she hasn't provoked him without a plan. The Raging Ape attacks forcefully, but Eld stands firm, readying his magic. The adventurer watches in surprise as he channels magical energy into his staff, ready to counterattack. Eld casts a Shadow Fog around the Raging Ape, restricting its movement, and then casts Blood Poison, spreading poison across the field to weaken the creature. The Raging Ape roars angrily, but is enveloped by the poisoned fog. The Shadow Fog restricts its vision, while the Blood Poison slowly drains its vitality, weakening it. The adventurer is surprised to see that he managed to restrain the Raging Ape, something even she had not managed. Ignoring the compliment, he decides to heal her wounds. Using his healing magic, he eliminates the pain she felt, leaving her amazed at his abilities. The adventurer is shocked to see him use both offensive and healing magic, something unheard of. He reflects on how little adventurers know about sages. Despite restraining the Raging Ape, he admits his spell isn't strong enough to fully hold it, and they must focus on finishing the battle. He considers that defeating the Raging Ape with poison alone would take too long. As they discuss reinforcements, the female adventurer reveals her true identity as the strongest known adventurer, the Flamespear, and introduces herself as Milia. Eld is surprised to learn that Milia is the Flamespear, as he had expected the strongest adventurer to be a man. Introducing himself, he tells her to call him Eld, while she allows him to call her Milia. Milia feels embarrassed for being unable to handle the Raging Ape and apologizes, while Eld reassures her. Curious, He asks if her title as Flame Spear comes from possessing the flame weapon skill, which she confirms with surprise. Milia reveals her true title as Hero. Eld realizes she holds a superior job compared to his previous world, though weaker in this one. He reflects that her potential is wasted without the right knowledge and skills, as her class is highly powerful. Seeing an opportunity, he asks Milia to assist him so they can finish the battle quickly. Eld asks Milia to continuously attack while he distracts the ape, suggesting she use a simple skill called combo attack. Surprised, she admits she doesn't know it, which shocks Eld. He quickly decides to purchase the skill for her and instructs her to repeat exactly what he says to activate it. Milia is shocked when the new skill activates. Eld instructs her to swing her spear while chanting the skill's name. Following his guidance, she shouts combo attack and launches her strike, putting the technique into action for the first time. Milia is stunned after successfully activating the skill for the first time, questioning how it happened and who Eld really is. Eld brushes it off with a smile, calling himself just an F-rank adventurer who knows a thing or two, while hinting there are other ways to learn skills as well. Milia doubts Eld's claim, thinking an F-rank adventurer shouldn't possess such knowledge, while Eld calmly insists he does. Suddenly both are caught off guard as the raging ape bursts out with overwhelming force, towering before them and ready to attack again. Raging ape bursts out with overwhelming force, towering before them and ready to attack again. The raging ape breaks free from the ground restraints, thrashing wildly despite its vision being obscured. Eld warns that the monster's random attacks are still dangerous. While Milia braces herself to continue the fight, Eld decides to deactivate the status effects and take on the monster's aggression himself. He urges Milia to use the newly learned combo attack while he holds back the raging ape, pushing her to stop hesitating and strike. The raging ape launches a powerful attack, but Eld blocks it with Magic Guard, his strongest defensive spell. With the shield holding, he signals Milia to strike. Milia channels her power and ignites her spear with flames, unleashing Flame Weapon. With determination, she charges straight at the raging ape, striking it head-on. Milia unleashes a powerful combo attack, striking the raging ape with blazing force. The beast reels back in pain as her rapid, fiery blows continue, overwhelming it with relentless energy. Milia, filled with determination, channels her strength and pushes forward against the raging ape. Flames swirl around her spear as she charges with all her might, unleashing a powerful strike while shouting with resolve. Milia's fiery strike lands with overwhelming force, sending the raging ape crashing to the ground in defeat. She stares at her weapon in awe, astonished by the sheer power she had just unleashed, something she never thought she was capable of. After defeating the raging ape, both Eld and Milia gain levels from the battle. Milia is surprised at how easily they managed to take it down, realizing it was thanks to their teamwork. Eld acknowledges her efforts and knowledge, despite her being F-rank. Impressed, he asks Milia if she would like to form a party with him, at least for a while. Milia questions Eld's offer, surprised he wants to form a party. Eld explains he has been fighting many boss-class monsters recently, but can't defeat them quickly on his own. With her firepower, they could handle them efficiently, splitting rewards equally, and he would even teach her useful skills. Convinced, Milia agrees, though she still finds it hard to believe he's ranked as low as F. Milia and Eld shake hands, agreeing to work together. With their partnership sealed, a powerful new duo is formed, ready to face future challenges side by side. Eld explains how skill points shape one's fighting style, stressing that once spent, they cannot be refunded. He points out the limitation of not being able to learn every skill, and reveals that he has a build in mind he believes to be the strongest. Milia, unsure of what to do, turns to him for guidance on which skills would make her stronger. Eld asks Milia if she had ever learned a skill before. She explains that she had learned Flame Weapon but believed skills came only from experience in weapons. Elden realizes the world's understanding of skills is underdeveloped, and notes that while basic skills can be learned at churches, most people are unaware of this. Elden asks Milia about her level, and she reveals she's level 118. He suggests leveling up more, but she insists it isn't necessary. When Milia mentions taking the ape's body to the guild, Eld instead uses his magic storage to instantly store it, surprising her. Milia is shocked as the ape's body suddenly vanishes. Eld calmly explains that he used magic storage to place it in another dimension, leaving her stunned at such an ability. Milia accepts Eld's strange abilities and decides to move forward with him. They set off together, showing determination. Soon after, they are back in combat, working side by side against another raging ape, each displaying their strength and coordination. As the sun sets, Eld and Milia decide to end their hunt for the day after defeating multiple monsters. They both agree it's time to head back. Their progress is shown clearly. Milia has advanced from level 18 to 19, while Eld has risen from level 7 to 10, marking significant growth for both. Eld and Milia deliver the corpse of the raging ape to the guild. The receptionist, shocked and unfamiliar with such a sight, learns from Milia that it's an A-rank monster. Startled, she quickly decides to fetch the branch manager to handle the situation. Eld privately asks Milia to take all the credit for defeating the raging ape, not wanting the attention or uproar that would come from a novice being recognized for such a feat. Though surprised, Milia listens as Eld insists he doesn't care for the recognition. Just then, the branch manager arrives, shocked to hear that they truly defeated an A-rank monster. Eld reassures Milia that if she ever changes her mind, she can speak up. At the guild, the branch manager asks about the raging ape's cost. Milia immediately reveals that it was mostly Eld who defeated it, ignoring his earlier request to keep quiet. Shocked, the manager presses Eld for confirmation, while Eld panics, reminding Milia of what he had just told her. Embarrassed, she apologizes, admitting no one had ever instructed her to hide such things before. At the guild, Milia introduces Eldo as an F-rank novice. The branch manager is shocked, unable to believe someone of that rank could stand against an A-rank monster. Milia explains that novices can't rank up due to the guild system, meaning Eld has been cheated and stuck at the lowest rank despite his extraordinary abilities. Eld himself seems surprised to hear this truth. Milia explains that the ranking system was changed to stop adventurers from taking dangerous requests they couldn't handle, with novices unable to rise higher and inferior jobs struggling more. She mentions that about 10 years ago, Cardinal Georgius reformed the system into what it is now. Eld, however, sees it as unfair, believing strength should matter more than job titles, and suspects the changes feel like a conspiracy. The guildmaster apologizes, but insists those are the current rules. Eld grows suspicious about the system, noting how superior jobs are treated as inferior ones, hinting at something shady behind it. He recalls that the capital's cathedral, once used for job changes, lies in ruins, possibly tied to Cardinal Georgius' reforms. At the guild, the master is shocked when Milia mentions Eld's name, realizing he managed to restrain the raging ape despite being F-rank. The guild master then asks if Eld registered in Ilia, confirming his identity when Eld says his name. Rumors spread about Eld, the F-rank novice from Ilia, claiming he even fought a sea dragon directly. The guildmaster is shocked to realize he is that person, and offers to raise his rank as a special favor. Eld, concerned about standing out, hesitates. The master explains that his battle against the sea dragon alone is a great achievement, and with the branch manager's recommendation and his accomplishments, his rank can officially be increased. Eld thanks the guildmaster for raising his rank and hands over his guild card for confirmation. The guildmaster notes that despite Eld's many achievements, being a sage is considered an unknown job with little information, similar to other so-called inferior jobs. Eld reflects that, much like Milia's role as a hero, the sage class is misunderstood. He realizes that heroes were once treated the same way until recently, and thinks that if he had been born 200 years earlier, he would have been treated as just another novice too. Eld reflects that although the sage class will always be seen as unknown because it can't be gained through the coming-of-age ceremony, it doesn't matter to him because he knows everything about sages. The guildmaster informs him that his rank has been raised to E rank, though ranks can only increase one step at a time. Eldon accepts this with gratitude, determined to prove himself further. Eld and Milia finalize the purchase of the raging ape, shocked by its worth exceeding 100 million gils. Eld stores the reward using his magic storage, noting its immense value. With business settled, they decide to shift the discussion toward Eld's skills, planning to continue before heading to the new hunting grounds. Eld asks Milia if she's ready, but before they can proceed, a dangerous blood tiger suddenly appears, catching their attention and preparing to strike. Milia explains that the blood tiger is a superior B-rank monster with great attack power, durability, and agility, far stronger than the raging ape. Eld, however, remains calm, saying the skill build he taught her earlier should be enough, while Milia is surprised at how lightly he treats the threat. Milia gains confidence, believing she can face the challenge, while Eld smiles in approval at her determination. Milia activates her skill and charges forward, clashing directly with the ferocious blood tiger as it lunges to attack. Milia unleashes a flurry of strikes using combo attack, empowered by the effective attack field, clashing head-on with the blood tiger's overwhelming force. Milia lands a precise strike on the blood tiger, using guard pierce to weaken its defenses, while Eld explains the nature of the skill. Milia channels the support attack skill, focusing her strength. Her weapon glows with power as she prepares, and the blood tiger charges toward her with ferocity. Milia steadies her stance, her weapon surging with immense power. With fierce determination in her eyes, she unleashes her ultimate move, Full Burst Crash, ready to strike with overwhelming force. Eldo explains that Full Burst Crash greatly boosts attack power while keeping all previous enhancements active, marking it as a hero-exclusive offensive skill. Milia charges forward with determination as the Blood Tiger rushes to meet her head-on. The Blood Tiger leaps fiercely at its target, fangs bared. Milia braces herself, stomping the ground and unleashing a powerful strike that sends shockwaves through the battlefield, flames igniting around her weapon as smoke fills the air. The Blood Tiger lunges forward with ferocity. Claws extended to strike, Milia slams her foot down, releasing a burst of force that collides with the beast. As the impact clears, she stands firm, her spear ablaze and ready, surrounded by rising smoke from the powerful clash. Eldo reflects on the power of the hero build, noting it as one of the highest damage-dealing classes, only surpassed by the Sage. Milia, realizing the strength she now holds, feels the weight of what it means to be a hero, capable of handling multiple opponents at once, and even fighting solo. Filled with joy and pride after her victory, she declares her accomplishment with confidence. As Milia catches her breath after the fight, a second Blood Tiger suddenly leaps from the shadows. Shocked and unprepared, she realizes too late that another threat had been waiting to strike. The Blood Tiger lunges, but Eldo quickly intercepts, shielding Milia from the attack. Their teamwork proves effective, striking in unison and pushing the beast back. In the aftermath, Eldo acknowledges Milia's efforts. While she steadies herself, relieved yet determined, Eldo blocks the tiger's strike with his shield, calmly explaining the existence of stronger defensive skills and advanced techniques like the counter combo, which not only repel enemy attacks but also enhance one's own strength. Eldo uses his magic to locate more enemies nearby, then swiftly finishes off the Blood Tiger before him with a powerful fire spell, preparing for the battles to come. Milia begins to suspect Eldo might be able to handle everything alone, but Eldo admits his current level is too low to rely solely on magic. He explains that's why he needs her help to keep the hunt efficient. Eldo informs Milia that a pack of Blood Tigers is nearby. With time still on their side, they decide to continue the hunt together, both motivated and ready for the next challenge. Milia activates the hero's defensive skill, Overguard, realizing its power to strengthen her defense. With guidance, she learns to focus it more effectively, improving both her offense and defense, while Eldo explains its usefulness against multiple or single attacks. Milia becomes motivated, believing she can reach R rank or even S rank with her newfound strength. Eldo acknowledges her ambition and prepares to guide her, explaining that to achieve such heights, she will need the perfect skill build. Eldo brings Milia to face multiple Blood Tigers at once, preparing her for the next stage of training. He asks if she's ready to handle the challenge, signaling a tougher battle ahead. Milia leaps into battle with full confidence, determined to claim victory against the Blood Tigers. Eldo, however, grows uneasy, sensing that the fight may not be as simple as she believes. Milia strikes the ground with a powerful shockwave, sending force rippling through the area. The Blood Tigers are knocked back, while she steadies herself ready to press the attack amidst the rising dust and chaos. Milia unleashes a sweeping wide attack, her weapon cutting through the space in front of her. The force of the strike pushes back multiple Blood Tigers at once, overwhelming them with its reach and power. Milia's first wide attack fails to finish the Blood Tigers, forcing her to strike again with another sweeping blow. She pushes herself to cut through them once more, but something unexpected with her weapon catches her attention mid-battle. Milia becomes surrounded by multiple Blood Tigers, overwhelmed as they close in on her. She desperately tries to defend herself, calling out for Eldo, while flames suddenly surge into the scene, hinting at his intervention. The Blood Tigers are engulfed in flames, turning to ash as Milia remains protected within her barrier. Eldo, holding his staff, watches the aftermath calmly, revealing he was the one who wiped out the enemies with his magic. Milia rushes to Eldo, relieved, but he calmly points out her mistakes during the battle. He explains that she failed to strengthen her shockwave with support attack and didn't account for the cooldown of wide attack. Eldo instructs her that, in such cases, she must use another skill before repeating the same one, ensuring she fully understands the mechanics. Milia admits she got carried away, but Eldo reassures her, praising how quickly she managed to defend herself with Overguard. He acknowledges her natural battle sense, leaving her flustered yet grateful for his words. Eldo and Milia decide to continue training and head to the next challenge with determination. Meanwhile, back in town, guild members are left in shock, reacting with wide eyes and panic to something unexpected. Eldo and Milia return to the guild with an enormous pile of defeated Blood Tigers, shocking everyone by revealing they brought back all 73 of them. The guild staff are left completely stunned and overwhelmed by the sheer number. No guild can believe Eldo's performance, considering that an E rank doesn't reflect his true abilities. Milia confirms his talent, while the guildmaster admits he underestimated him. Suddenly, Eldo begins using his magic, drawing everyone's attention, who are confused by what he is about to do. Eldo reveals that he has been storing the monsters in another space with his magic storage ability, surprising the guildmaster. Although he doesn't fully understand, he confirms the impressive usefulness of the technique. Milia comments on how Eldo possesses so much power and knowledge yet avoids standing out. Suspicious, the guildmaster agrees to keep everything secret, as no one would believe a newcomer capable of such a feat. Eldo's achievements earn him a promotion to D rank. The guildmaster explains that further advancement will be harder, requiring approval from other branches. Eldo accepts the promotion and decides to focus on leveling up since they already have enough money. Eldo chooses to rank up through guild achievements rather than immediate promotion, aiming to get closer to his personal goal. Milia supports his decision, and the guildmaster mentions a special request available only to strong adventurers like them. The guild assigns them a reconnaissance mission in the dangerous Forest of Death, a place where only a small fraction of adventurers survive, heightening the sense of risk. The guildmaster explains that only high-level monsters inhabit the forest, so the choice of who to send is critical. Eldo reviews the request, which includes a rough map indicating a large, unusual pillar deep within the forest. Eldo recognizes the structure as the Ceiling Pillar, known for containing monsters stronger than area bosses, comparable to raid bosses. The guildmaster explains that a report mentions spotting something similar, and the request is to investigate it, since if true, countermeasures would be necessary. Eldo accepts the mission, fully aware of the dangers it carries, including the possibility of a monster stampede. Though he warns Milia about the risks, she firmly declares her resolve, willing to face the danger alongside him. The next day, Eldo unleashes a massive burst of flames, devastating the surroundings with his magic. Milia, caught in the intense moment, rushes forward with determination. In the Forest of Death, Eldo and Milia fend off vicious enemies. Milia pushes to keep moving quickly to gain achievements, but Eldo questions her urgency, hinting that her focus may be clouded by ambition. Milia reveals her true ambition. Through the Adventurer Honor System, she seeks to rise in rank and gain nobility. Her goal is to restore her fallen family's lost title and status. Eldo listens, surprised by her determination and the weight of her resolve. Eldo realizes Milia's true motivation is to restore her fallen house. With this in mind, he encourages them both to stay alive and earn achievements. Milia agrees, determined, as the two share a silent moment of resolve before pressing on. Eldo and Milia arrive at the Ceiling Pillar. Eldo explains that its orange glow signals about 5 days before the raid boss appears, with colors acting as a countdown to the event. Realizing the urgency, they decide to quickly report their findings, since the time left to prepare is short. Eldo and Milia return to the guild and urgently report that the Ceiling Pillar indicates a stampede will occur in 5 days. Shocked, the guild staff immediately plan to arrange warding devices to prepare, acknowledging the severity of the situation. The guild explains that activating the barrier will take about 4 days, but it should be ready in time. They promise to recommend Eldo for a promotion to C rank and Milia for a rank test if they survive the stampede. For now, the guild asks them to stay in the city to prepare for the upcoming threat. The day of the stampede arrives. A massive protective barrier surrounds the city, successfully activated in time. Milia, seeing it for the first time, wonders if such a defense will truly be enough to stop the incoming threat. Eldo remains calm, acknowledging its activation. The barrier's purpose is explained. It doesn't destroy the monsters, but drives them away until they vanish from sight. However, something unusual happens, and both Eldo and Milia notice the barrier fading. Unsure if this is normal, they rush off quickly to check what's going on. The two arrive at the center of town, where the barrier device is in ruins, heavily damaged and releasing smoke. Eldo realizes in shock that the device meant to protect the city has been destroyed. Eldo and Milia discover injured guards near the destroyed device. Among them, one man reveals a dark mark on his hand, showing he was part of the Garden of Despair. Eldo realizes the man infiltrated as a guard to sabotage the device, confirming the attack was deliberate. Eldo realizes the saboteur was likely a member of the Garden of Despair. The guild members inspect the broken device and reveal it's an ancient tool from their ancestors, making repairs nearly impossible. Even if fixed, it would need time to recharge, leaving the city vulnerable for days. Eldo concludes it's an OOP art, a relic from another world. The city falls into chaos as adventurers are called to help, and residents are evacuated. Eldo reflects that, while they might handle the Horde, the raid boss is an entirely different threat, one that destroys everything in its path without mercy. Realizing there's no other choice, he prepares himself, knowing no one will be safe once it appears. Milia looks at Eldo in shock, realizing his intention. Eldo entrusts her with protecting the city, while he sets out on his own mission. With determination, he declares that he will stop the stampede himself. Eldo tells Milia that he has a plan, though it isn't flawless, and asks her to be ready in case he fails. Despite her worries and disbelief, Eldo launches himself forward, leaving her behind as he rushes toward the danger. Eldo rushes forward, acknowledging he can't handle the countless monsters alone. He realizes the only way to stop the stampede is by defeating the raid boss leading them. Eldo advances quickly toward the towering ceiling pillar. The structure glows with energy as it begins to rise from its foundation, releasing fragments while a surge of power crackles around it, signaling the awakening of what lies within. The ceiling pillar begins to crack and crumble, chunks breaking apart with explosive force. Debris rises into the air as the structure collapses. Eldo watches with determination, fully aware that the monster sealed within is about to be released. From the shattered pillar emerges a massive dragon, its body crackling with electricity. Eldo faces it with a firm gaze, recognizing the enemy as the raid boss, the heaven-destroying lightning dragon, a colossal beast radiating overwhelming power. Eldo steadies his staff, a confident smile on his face. He recalls how, in BBO, the Sage class was considered the strongest, with most players choosing it. Now, he prepares to prove why, ready to unleash its true power against the overwhelming threat before him. The townspeople run through the streets in panic as the alarm spreads. The girl approaches, urging everyone to hurry, warning them of the Horde's approach. From a watchtower and balconies, lookouts scan the horizon, and one man finally spots the threat, sounding the alarm to the rest of the town. From the watchtower, the guards spot a massive horde of monsters approaching the town. Panic spreads as the creatures draw near, and preparations to shut the gates begin. The female knight, called Flamespear, suddenly runs off toward the danger instead of retreating with the others. Determined, the knight orders the gates to be closed behind her and rushes out alone, vowing to hold back the horde for as long as possible. With concern in her eyes, she thinks of Eldo, praying for his safety as she charges into the battlefield. A monstrous creature towers before the young man, stirring memories of his past struggles. He recalls how, back when he first played the game, this beast had appeared as a formidable early boss that defeated him countless times. Even after reaching the level cap back then, his skills were still not enough to overcome it. The giant, menacing monster looms over the battlefield, facing the protagonist. The young man looks up at the creature, determined, while lightning crackles around them, setting the stage for an intense showdown. The dragon unleashes a devastating surge of lightning, scorching the ground and destroying everything nearby. The young man observes calmly, recognizing the creature's ability to inflict area-wide damage just by existing. Despite the danger, he notes that there are ways to counter it, preparing himself for the challenge. Explosions erupt around him as the dragon's lightning strikes the ground. Unfazed, the young man activates an anti-magic skill specialized in electricity resistance. Surrounded by protective energy, he prepares to nullify part of the incoming damage. The young man dodges the dragon's crushing blows, using speed and precision to avoid the brunt of its attacks. Though his resistance protects him from the lightning's spread, he realizes he cannot withstand direct strikes in his current state. The sky rumbles as an immense bolt of lightning crashes down, shattering the ground. The young man's eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the attack, the devastating power known as Divine Lightning. The dragon unleashes a catastrophic strike, blasting the battlefield with overwhelming force. The ground shatters and smoke engulfs the area as the young man braces himself, barely managing to withstand the devastating impact. The young man struggles against the crushing force of the attack, feeling the real danger of losing health in this world. He notes his current level is only 18, far below the usual requirement of 50 to face such a foe. The dragon's Divine Lightning skill threatens instant death, forcing him to stay completely focused if he wants to survive. Wounded but determined, the young man heals himself and channels his strength. Surrounded by a surge of magical energy, he prepares for battle, resolute in facing the powerful foe once more. The young man rapidly layers multiple enhancement fields around himself, boosting his strength and abilities. He then channels earth magic into his weapon, exploiting the lightning dragon's elemental weakness to prepare for a decisive strike. Though the strain on his body is immense, and controlling the stacked skills proves difficult, the young man completes his preparation. His magic power surges to an overwhelming level, amplified 1,000-fold. Ready to unleash its full force, the dragon prepares another devastating divine lightning strike, blasting the battlefield once more. The young man steadies himself, acknowledging the attack but showing resolve, ready to counter despite the overwhelming power. The divine lightning crashes down again, but this time the young man swiftly evades the strike. Determined, he declares that the attack won't catch him off guard anymore, recognizing its predictable downward pattern as he prepares to counter the dragon head-on. The protagonist narrowly evades another crushing strike as the ground explodes around him. Smoke and debris fill the air while the dragon looms in the distance, its power pressing down as he steadies himself for the next move. The battlefield fills with dust, clouding the protagonist's vision. Calm and focused, he analyzes the enemy's attack pattern and swiftly moves into position, anticipating the dragon's next strike. The protagonist identifies the dragon's next move as Lightning Race, a straight-line attack compared to the drop-down strike of Divine Lightning. Recognizing the pattern, he braces himself, ready to counter despite the overwhelming speed and power. Amidst the dust and chaos, the protagonist relies on instinct and memory of the dragon's attack patterns. Gripping his weapon tightly, he channels his focus and magic, preparing to unleash his counterattack at the precise moment. The protagonist feels the heavy toll of his stacked enhancements, draining both his magic and his life force. Despite the pain and exhaustion, he acknowledges this as his only chance to win, pushing himself beyond his limits in a way far more real than the game ever was. Amid the smoke and thunderous roars, the dragon braces itself for another strike. The protagonist, glowing with unleashed power, charges forward at full speed, closing the distance to launch his decisive attack. Exhausted and struggling to breathe, the protagonist grips his weapon tightly, eyes wide with determination. In front of him, the dragon lets out a furious roar, shaking the battlefield as their clash reaches its peak. The protagonist faces the towering dragon head-on, acknowledging the vast difference in their strength. For now, he relies solely on his knowledge of the creature's attack patterns from the game to evade its strikes, knowing a direct confrontation would deal no real damage. Realizing a direct fight is impossible, the protagonist raises his staff high. His only option is to stack every enhancement he possesses and unleash his strongest attack in one decisive strike. The protagonist channels immense earth magic, summoning a colossal boulder from above. With overwhelming force, he brings it crashing down onto the dragon in a single devastating strike, the gigantic boulder crushing blow. The massive boulder crashes down on the dragon, shattering the ground and engulfing it in rubble. As the dust settles, the protagonist looks on cautiously, wondering if his decisive strike was enough to finish the battle. As the dust clears, the protagonist realizes the dragon has survived. Dark clouds gather above, signaling a far greater threat. He recognizes it as the dragon's ultimate move, an even larger version of Divine Lightning, a devastating last resort capable of annihilation. The dragon prepares its ultimate spell, summoning an enormous magic circle in the sky. The protagonist recognizes it as the lightning strike of extinction, a devastating attack impossible to dodge. Realizing the sheer power of the spell, he knows that if it hits, nothing of him will remain. The sky erupts as countless bolts of lightning rain down from the massive magic circle. The ground is torn apart by the overwhelming energy, and the protagonist stands at the center of the storm, bracing himself against the unavoidable onslaught. Lightning rains down endlessly, sealing off every path of escape. The protagonist realizes the attack forms an inescapable barrier of destruction, leaving him no choice but to face the overwhelming force head-on. Though frustrated, he couldn't finish the dragon in a single strike. The protagonist refuses to give up. Gathering the last of his remaining magic, he prepares himself for one final desperate attack. With the last of his strength, the protagonist summons another massive boulder, though only at a fraction of its full power. Determined, he resolves to strike first, knowing he must kill the dragon before its ultimate attack kills him. Exhausted and barely standing, the protagonist breathes heavily after unleashing his final attack. As the dust clears, he sees the dragon crushed beneath the massive boulders, finally allowing himself a small sigh of relief. Surrounded by shattered boulders and rising smoke, the protagonist stands victorious. The massive dragon lies defeated beneath the rubble, marking the completion of its subjugation. A fierce battle unfolds as a tiger clashes with another beast. A woman notices the danger just as a massive gorilla charges in with brutal force. However, the creature suddenly halts. Confused by an unexpected interruption, the woman readies her weapon, flames igniting around her as she charges at the massive gorilla. With fierce determination, she strikes head-on, clashing against the beast's overwhelming strength. Surrounded by a pack of tigers, the woman grips her weapon tightly, realizing she is outnumbered. With determination in her eyes, she prepares to make a final stand, convinced this might be her last battle. As the monsters suddenly vanish, Malia looks around in shock and relief. Eldo appears, exhausted but alive, revealing that he had taken down the threat. Realizing Malia had been holding off the beasts until now, he apologizes for arriving late. Eldo reveals that he defeated the raid boss, which caused the monster stampede to stop. As proof, he shows a massive material taken from the fallen beast. Milia is stunned, realizing it's from an S-rank monster and that Eldo fought it alone to protect everyone. Grateful for her support, Eldo thanks Milia and asks her for a favor. When she agrees to help with anything, he surprises her by requesting that she take the credit for defeating the raid boss and stopping the stampede. Shocked, Milia can hardly believe what she just heard. Milia refuses to take credit for the victory, insisting Eldo deserves the recognition. However, Eldo explains his reasoning. Their current ranks limit progress, and her advancement would be more impactful. He suggests it would benefit them both if she rose in status, even hinting at wanting her to become a noble, which would strengthen his own position. Milia reluctantly accepts Eldo's plan, promising to become a noble and repay her debt. Though she acknowledges his strength, she also finds him unusual for being a novice capable of defeating S-rank foes alone. Eldo simply takes her words in stride. Milia teases Eldo, saying his abilities make him seem otherworldly. Though she quickly brushes it off as a joke, she confidently assures him she'll handle things. While Eldo, slightly uneasy, reminds her they need to align their story before facing others. As the townspeople brace for an attack, they suddenly notice the monsters halting. Confused and anxious, they realize the horde that was about to overwhelm them has vanished without warning, leaving behind an eerie silence. Milia appears before the gathered townsfolk, declaring that she defeated the S-rank dragon that had emerged. She explains that the monsters vanished because their source had been destroyed. Milia presents the dragon's horn as proof of her victory. The townsfolk are shocked that she, known as the Flame Spear, could defeat such a powerful foe alone. Feeling the immense energy radiating from the horn, they accept her explanation that this is why the stampede ended, though some still question if she truly accomplished it herself. The townspeople cheer in relief, celebrating their survival and praising Milia as the hero who saved them. The guild branch manager approaches, amazed by the feat, admitting he never thought it was possible to defeat the monster from the ceiling pillar. The guildmaster explains that the sealed monster was thought undefeatable, which is why barriers had protected them for generations. While Milia receives thanks for saving everyone, she is asked about Eldo's whereabouts. Caught off guard, she claims he evacuated, leading the guildmaster to assume Eldo is too inexperienced to handle S-rank battles despite his strength. Milia, pressured by questions about how she defeated the dragon, admits she doesn't remember much, using the battle as an excuse. Meanwhile, Eldo watches from outside the city, hoping things go smoothly for her. As the people celebrate, Milia is praised, but Eldo quietly apologizes from afar. Milia explains that she targeted the dragon's horns, claiming it was its weak spot and that she used all her skills to break them. The guild manager is impressed, noting how rare and difficult such a feat is, praising her courage and judgment. He decides to report her victory to the guild leader, recognizing her as the one who defeated the S-rank monster, while Milia forces a grateful smile, hiding the truth. The guild manager acknowledges the enormity of Milia's supposed achievement, saying it's worthy of an S-rank promotion, though the final decision rests with higher authorities. He requests the dragon's horn as proof, which she agrees to hand over. While thanking her again, he promises to vouch for her as much as possible, but she will still need to wait for the guild leader's final judgment. The guild manager bows deeply in gratitude, thanking Milia for her efforts. She stays composed, acknowledging his words, and then leaves the building with a calm but firm expression, carrying the weight of the deception as others recognize her supposed success. Eldo and Milia meet again after the events. She apologizes, feeling guilty about taking credit, but Eldo reassures her, saying it helped him get closer to his goal. Milia promises to repay him, while Eldo decides to focus on increasing his level and taking on more requests, aiming for stronger challenges. Eldo reflects on how his mindset has changed compared to before, while Milia agrees. Soon after, someone informs Milia about the town of Elias, which is overwhelmed by a surge of monsters from the nearby Great Forest, leading to many subjugation requests. Milia decides to stay behind for the assessment, while Eldo is encouraged to head toward Elias, where many requests await. He agrees, realizing this means they will part ways for now. Eldo reflects on all the help he received since meeting Milia, feeling grateful for her support. Though their time together was brief, they exchange thanks, acknowledging the bond they formed before parting ways. Before parting ways, Eldo lightens the mood by joking about needing Milia to take credit for his future feats, flustering her. Afterward, they exchange sincere farewells, with Milia wishing him well and Eldo assuring her he will take care. Eldo and Milia share a firm handshake, parting ways with mutual respect and a promise to meet again in the future. Eldo sets off with determination, looking ahead to his next destination, Elias, ready to continue his journey. Deep in the great Elias forest, the dark and dangerous environment reveals skulls scattered across the ground. A wild tiger runs ferociously through the forest, stalking its prey amidst the dense vegetation. A tiger charges through the forest but is struck by a barrage of arrows and weapons, collapsing from its wounds. As it falls, a large foot steps forward, revealing the presence of its hunter. The tiger lies defeated on the ground as a group of men approaches its body. One of them seizes the beast by its head and begins dragging it away, showing their dominance over the fallen predator. A massive monstrous warrior brutally crushes two men in his hands, lifting them with ease and tearing them apart. Standing tall in the rain, he roars with rage and power, asserting his terrifying dominance. The protagonist flies over the mountains, checking his map but unable to locate the place from above. He decides to land and search on foot. Walking through the forest, he notices something hidden by the trees and realizes why it wasn't visible from the sky. The protagonist reaches a suspension bridge, the only path leading to the city. As he begins to cross, a sudden voice calls out to stop him, catching him by surprise. The protagonist arrives at the gates of Elias and is questioned about his rank and purpose. He identifies himself as D rank, explaining he came due to the many monster subjugation requests. However, the guard informs him that the situation has recently changed, and the information he had was already outdated. The guard explains that in recent days, a massive outbreak of hungry ogres has occurred. These are high-level B-rank monsters, dangerous due to their strength and intelligence. They can wear human armor and fight strategically, making battles against multiple ones extremely difficult. The presence of so many suggests the likelihood of a king ogre leading them. The protagonist recalls defeating a lightning dragon by stacking enhancements and striking with full power, but realizes such tactics won't work against groups of ogres, as they could overwhelm him with numbers. He considers the possibility of an even higher-ranked threat, the Emperor Ogre, leading them. Aware of the danger, he decides to move forward cautiously, regretting being separated from Milia. The guard explains that ogres originally lived deep in Elias and never entered human territory. However, as their numbers grew, they expanded their hunting grounds, driving other monsters closer to the city. This sudden shift led many adventurers to rush in, hoping to subjugate the creatures. The guards warn the protagonist about the dangers of venturing deep into the forest, as many adventurers have already been attacked by the hungry ogres. Though they cannot force anyone to fight, they stress caution. The protagonist accepts the warning and prepares to move forward. The protagonist enters the city and notices how lifeless it feels, with people anxious and withdrawn. He understands the reason. Ogres are approaching from across the river. Ordinary adventurers can't handle the threat, and if nothing is done, the ogres will eventually destroy the city as well. The protagonist arrives at the Elias Guild branch. Remembering the mention of available requests, he enters the building, ready to check how many tasks await him. Inside the guild, the protagonist notices several requests posted. While he looks through them, a guild member approaches, asking about his skills and intentions. After his modest reply, the member quickly offers him a specific request. A guild staff member explains the anything subjugation request, where adventurers can hunt any monster and bring proof as fulfillment. Because of the ogres exterminating other creatures, monster numbers have decreased, but the danger of encountering ogres remains high. The protagonist realizes how desperate the situation has become. The guild staff pleads for the protagonist to take on the task, explaining that the council is offering great rewards. He accepts the request, reasoning it will be more efficient than a normal mission since he can hunt freely. With that, he prepares to head out immediately, while being cautioned not to act recklessly. The protagonist leaves the guild and passes by the gate, where a guard recognizes him and asks if he accepted a request. Confirming it, the protagonist sets out toward the forest. The guard warns him to retreat if the situation becomes too dangerous, and he agrees before crossing the suspension bridge once more. The protagonist enters the forest beyond the bridge, ready to face whatever challenges await him. With determination, he begins his hunt, prepared for the dangers ahead. The protagonist searches the forest but finds no monsters, suspecting the ogres have already devoured them all. Deciding to be cautious, he prepares to use invisibility and magic search to locate any threats nearby. The protagonist spots a wolf, but before anything happens, the beast is suddenly seized by an ogre. The scene reveals the terrifying presence of the monster, towering and menacing. The protagonist comes face to face with the ogre, which still clutches the wolf it caught. Calmly, he watches as the creature gruesomely devours its prey right before him, setting a tense atmosphere for the battle ahead. The ogre suddenly spews a dark, violent blast toward the protagonist. Reacting quickly, he deflects the attack with his weapon, the impact exploding around him as the fight intensifies. The ogre charges in with a powerful punch, but the protagonist quickly casts a magical guard. The barrier shines and blocks the attack, stopping the ogre's strike just in time. The ogre smashes through a massive tree with brute force, sending debris flying. The protagonist is knocked back to the ground by the impact but remains conscious, realizing just how overwhelming the ogre's strength is. As the ogre swings its massive axe toward him, the protagonist narrowly reacts and counters with a spell. He launches a sticky bomb, aiming to restrain the creature before it overwhelms him further. The sticky bomb latches onto the ogre, trapping it against a tree. Taking advantage of the opening, the protagonist unleashes a powerful attack, detonating the spell with a fiery explosion. The protagonist casts Flame Pillar, engulfing the ogre in a towering blaze. The monster screams in agony as the flames consume it, while the protagonist stands firm, focused, and unyielding. The battle ends with the ogre burned and collapsed on the ground. Standing before the fallen monster, the protagonist acknowledges his victory, marking it as the first of many to come. Just as the defeated ogre tries to flee, the protagonist notices its intent to call for reinforcements. Acting swiftly, he charges magic into his hand and unleashes a fireball, striking the monster before it can escape. The fireball strikes the ogre head-on, engulfing it in flames before it collapses lifelessly to the ground. The protagonist reflects on how dangerous it would have been if the creature had managed to call reinforcements. The protagonist considers conserving mana since Milia isn't with him, planning to avoid using his strongest skills unless necessary. Looking at the fallen ogre, he reflects that his flame pillar should have been enough to kill it, raising doubts about whether the monster's strength is greater than expected or if something else is at play. As the protagonist remains alert, the sound of rushing movement catches his attention. Suddenly, a pack of large wolves bursts from the forest, charging straight toward him, leaving him shocked and unprepared for their sudden appearance. The wolves rush past the protagonist without attacking, completely ignoring him. He realizes they are fleeing from something else, but remains uncertain about what could have driven them into such a panic. A massive club suddenly smashes into a tree beside the protagonist, barely missing him. Shocked by the near hit, he quickly realizes a powerful enemy is approaching from the shadows of the forest. The protagonist finds himself surrounded as multiple ogres emerge from the forest, each armed and ready to fight. Despite the overwhelming numbers, he braces himself, realizing his situation has just gotten far more dangerous. The protagonist assesses the situation, noting how agile the ogres are despite their size. Realizing that being surrounded would be fatal, he quickly looks for an escape route and spots a narrow passage through the rocks that could turn the fight in his favor. The protagonist seizes the opportunity and runs toward the narrow path, planning to lure the ogres inside. To make the trap believable, he pretends to be desperate, shouting for help, while the ogres sneer confidently and chase after him. As the ogres pursue him into the narrow passage, the protagonist triggers his trap. Flames erupt, sealing the path with a blazing wall of fire, trapping the monsters inside and cutting off their escape. The protagonist activates his full strategy, casting Flame Pillar X5 to create multiple blazing infernos within the narrow path. The ogres are engulfed in the trap all at once, leaving them no chance to escape his fiery assault. With the ogres trapped in the wall of flames, the protagonist unleashes his finishing move. He casts a powerful fireball, blasting through the fiery corridor and delivering the coup de grace to wipe them out completely. The ogres, burned and weakened, collapse to the ground one after another, leaving the battlefield littered with their defeated bodies. The protagonist faces a towering ogre at close range, both battered from battle, as flames and smoke surround them. The protagonist sheathes his sword after defeating the ogre, noting its unusual strength compared to the others. He reflects on the growing dangers ahead and steels himself for future battles. The protagonist activates a magic search to scan the surroundings and confirms no one is nearby. He then casts magic invisibility to move undetected. Concealed by magic, the protagonist blends into the forest and moves forward with determination, while distant explosions echo through the area. The protagonist walks past the corpses of defeated ogres, counting over 20 slain. Realizing his mana is nearly depleted, he decides to return to the city before exhausting his strength. The protagonist returns safely, surprising the guards and guild staff. They assume he avoided danger, but he reveals he defeated around 25 ogres, leaving everyone shocked and amazed. No guild member believes he defeated ogres since he shows no proof. Calmly, he reveals his skill, releasing the corpses from his magic storage. Shock spreads as everyone witnesses the bodies of the defeated ogres piling up before them. The guild staff panics, unsure how to handle the proof he presented, deciding to call the branch manager. The protagonist reflects that he might have stood out too much, though he recalls Milia's advice to be more noticeable. Soon after, a composed and authoritative woman explains that in the current guild, novices are treated poorly, so standing out and contributing greatly is necessary to rise in rank. The guild staff returns and asks him to accompany her to the warehouse. As the guild hall lacks space, he agrees, and together they head outside, eventually arriving at a large storage facility where she prepares to handle the ogres he brought. Inside the warehouse, the adventurer notes its large space once filled with monsters. Soon, the branch manager Royce arrives, surprised to meet someone capable of defeating ogres. The protagonist introduces himself as Eld, an adventurer. Royce prepares to witness Eld's results, while space is cleared for the demonstration. Eld activates his skill, summoning the defeated ogres into the warehouse. Royce is left in shock at the massive pile, stunned that all were taken down in a single day. Royce is stunned by the strange ability and admits it's the first he's heard of such a skill, unable to find it in the guild's records. Eld explains it's called magic storage, letting him store items in another dimension. Royce, overwhelmed, considers reporting it to headquarters, calling it a discovery of the century. The guild plans to verify and eventually share Eld's unique skill with the public, promising him rewards. Though he doesn't need money, he agrees, thinking it will help other adventurers grow stronger, and the guild handle greater threats. He also sees it as a way to avoid drawing unwanted attention each time he uses it. The agency manager asks to see Eld's card, and is surprised to discover that he is classified as a beginner. Confused, he questions the error, but Eld explains that he was treated as a newbie because the class joy didn't respond to his true power, despite it actually being a wisdom. The subject could be recognized as a mage since he uses his abilities, but the manager explains that only the class joy can officially determine the charge. Previously, it was possible to adjust this, but after the rise of Cardinal Georgius, the rules became stricter, and now only the regular gem is valid. The manager says there's nothing more he can do, and he accepts the situation. Hearing Cardinal Georgius's name, he remembers hearing it before. Thinking that this man may be responsible for treating superior jobs as inferior, he decides that one day he will confront him, and depending on his answer, he will make a serious decision. The protagonist reflects on using his knowledge from BBO to his advantage. The guild manager, unable to help with his job classification, offers him a promotion recommendation instead. With this, the boy secures 2 out of the 3 recommendations needed to raise his rank. The guild manager notes the rarity of a recommendation from the capital's branch. The protagonist recalls only completing a single request, but suspects Mina's influence. With this new recommendation, he now meets all requirements to advance in rank and requests the promotion. The branch manager admits the ranking system based on jobs is unfair, but says the protagonist's achievements are too great for just a C rank. He promises that with continued accomplishments, headquarters can be petitioned for further rank increases, and the protagonist accepts this explanation. The protagonist proposes defeating all the ogres in the area. Shocked, the others question if it's possible, but acknowledge it would be a significant achievement. Determined, he resolves to attempt it. The branch manager acknowledges the protagonist's efforts, while others note that defeating the ogres could allow them to remain in the area. Curious about the urgency, the protagonist learns that the real issue isn't just the ogres, but the evacuation plan already in place. The capital plans to abandon the city if the ogres aren't defeated, forcing relocation. The townspeople, especially the elderly, fear being attacked during the move. The branch manager reveals this plan mainly serves the capital's convenience, not the locals' safety. The protagonist learns that when the capital was asked for help, they refused, telling the town to handle it themselves. The branch manager explains that the evacuation plan benefits the nobles, as Elias lies within Count Migas's territory, and rivals use monsters to weaken his control and seize his land. The protagonist listens, as the branch manager explains that Count Magus is loved by the common people, but despised by nobles. His opposition to the discrimination against inferior jobs, supported by figures like Cardinal Georgius, placed him in conflict with the nobility. The protagonist learns that Count Magus gathered inferiors across the country, giving them jobs and protection, earning hostility from nobles. Realizing this could benefit him, he decides to support the city and help prevent its evacuation, gaining the locals' trust. At night, the protagonist rests in his room, reflecting on the large responsibility he has taken on. Knowing he'll need his strength, he decides to get proper sleep to restore his mana for the challenges ahead. The protagonist recalls the dangerous battles of the day. realizing how close he came to death. Lying in his bed, he acknowledges he only has one life in this world, and resolves to be more cautious tomorrow under the moonlit night. At night, a carriage arrives, and a cloaked figure approaches a building. The person, with a determined look, knocks on the door, announcing their return to Count Migas. A messenger reports to Count Migas late at night, confirming the successful delivery of relief supplies. He then shares surprising news of an inferior-ranked adventurer, achieving the impossible by defeating a sea dragon. The Count acknowledges the importance, noting even the Maxia company is paying attention, while learning the adventurer is only a novice. Count Migas, intrigued by the news of the novice adventurer's feats, expresses his desire to meet him personally one day. As the boy rests, unaware of the growing attention around him, Count Migas reflects on the novice's potential, hoping he might become the beacon of hope their land desperately needs. At dawn, the boy steps out energized, his mana fully restored. After confirming he rested well, he surprises everyone by declaring his intent to investigate the ogre's nest. The boy suddenly takes off into the air, leaving the onlookers stunned as they realize he's actually flying toward the ogre's nest. Flying above the forest, the boy searches for the ogre's stronghold, realizing the fight won't end until their boss is defeated. Below, a group of adventurers prepares, ready to lend their strength. The boy continues flying over the vast forest, scanning for the enemy's base. Though smiling with determination, he worries his mana might run out if he doesn't find it soon. The boy spots something unusual hidden within the dense forest. Realizing its significance, he quickly descends and lands, preparing to investigate further. The boy cloaks himself with magic invisibility and approaches the cliffside carefully, his eyes sharp and focused on what lies ahead. From his hidden vantage point, the boy discovers a massive ogre at the roots of an enormous tree, surrounded by smaller creatures. He realizes he has found the enemy stronghold. The boy identifies the massive creature as a hungry ogre, noting that its presence confirms the ogre's nest must be nearby. The boy confirms he has found the ogre's nest and decides to head back to prepare. Upon returning to the village, he is suddenly confronted by a group of angry townspeople blocking his path. The boy returns to the village, surprised to find a tense crowd gathered. When he asks what's happening, the guild girl hesitantly begins to explain, leading to the reveal of something connected to the earlier warnings. A group of armed men arrives at the village, announcing that they've come to evacuate everyone from Elias. The armed men reveal a request from the Cathedral of the capital, authorizing them to handle the evacuation by any means necessary. They insist that their orders carry the authority of the capital itself. The armed men demand the villagers leave immediately, declaring the order absolute. The townsfolk protest, fearing the ogres outside and doubting such a cruel command came from the capital. The mercenaries dismiss their concerns, claiming they saw no ogres, and accusing the villagers of lying. Eld reveals that he already defeated the surrounding ogres, explaining why the mercenaries saw none. Still, they push the villagers to prepare for departure. The branch manager worries, acknowledging that disobeying the capital's orders would be dangerous, and notes that Count Migas's position could worsen as well. Eld realizes they are in a difficult situation. The mercenaries grow impatient as the villagers hesitate, wondering what to do. One of the mercenaries angrily lashes out, shouting at them to hurry up, calling them scum, and threatening them with force to get moving. One of the mercenaries violently smashes through crates and barrels, scattering food and supplies across the ground, showing his aggression and intimidation toward the villagers. The villagers panic as they see their food supplies destroyed, crying out in despair. One of the mercenaries mocks them, laughing cruelly and saying it doesn't matter since they'd throw it away anyway. The people are devastated, pointing out that the food was an important gift from Lord Migas, while the cruelty of the act leaves them shaken. The protagonist activates a spell called Suspension, instantly trapping the brute in midair. Shocked, the man panics as he's suddenly lifted off the ground, flailing helplessly while the villagers watch in surprise and fear. The brute's head slams with force, his face twisted in pain and panic as he's held high in the air. The other mercenaries look up in shock and fear, realizing the overwhelming power the protagonist just displayed. The protagonist safely brings the brute down using his magic, leaving him twitching and incapacitated on the ground. The mercenaries stare in shock and confusion, unable to comprehend what just happened. The protagonist steps forward, unwilling to stand by any longer. He reassures the others that he will handle the situation, calmly presenting himself as just a novice adventurer. The mercenaries mock him, laughing at the idea that someone ranked so low could possibly stop them. The protagonist calmly mocks his opponent, pointing out that he is even weaker than a novice. His confident words enrage the man, who lashes out in anger, but the boy insists he's only speaking the truth. The furious man unleashed a powerful slash with his weapon, striking the ground with explosive force as he charged at the protagonist in a fit of rage. The enemy's blade halted just before the protagonist, who stood unfazed. The man grew uneasy as the boy calmly pointed out his weakness, stating he lacked the strength to protect anyone from the ogres. The protagonist saw through the man's deception, realizing he never intended to protect anyone. Shocked and caught off guard, the man panicked, only to be swiftly struck down by the boy's decisive attack. The protagonist defeated his opponents with ease, proving they weren't strong enough to protect anyone. Standing firm, he declared that Elias no longer needed to be evacuated, as he himself would take care of the ogre threat. The defeated intruders fled, vowing revenge. The protagonist dismissed their threat lightly and told the guild to simply claim a wandering adventurer acted on his own, apologizing for taking matters into his own hands. The branch manager regretted being forced to follow higher orders, while the protagonist suspected the evacuation was a setup. He revealed knowledge of an artificial monster called the Magic Poison, an artifact that, when buried, drives all nearby monsters into a berserk state. The protagonist noticed monsters growing stronger and fiercer since his first battle. He reasoned that while the ogres would eventually perish, their rampage would destroy everything in their territory, forcing them to invade human lands. With the conveniently timed evacuation order, he concluded it was all part of a deliberate scheme. The protagonist revealed that the supposed order from the capital was likely a bluff, part of a larger scheme orchestrated by those opposing Count Magus. He suspected Cardinal Georgius as the mastermind, given the scale and influence required for such a plan. Though framed as a hypothesis, he urged secrecy about this suspicion, leaving others shocked at how far their enemies might go. The protagonist reflects that it's safer to assume the worst. He recalls that in BBO, only one group could create the magic poison, the users of forbidden arts known as the Garden of Despair. If Cardinal Georgius is connected to them, then the world is truly on the path to ruin. After the conflict, the protagonist asks the branch manager for a favor, to be introduced to Count Magus. The manager hesitates, warning that the Count is at odds with Cardinal Georgius, but reassures him that Count Magus will gladly welcome him with open arms. The protagonist resolves to meet with Count Magus, despite the risks. Determined, he declares that he cannot allow Cardinal Georgius to act unchecked and do as he pleases. The guild branch manager expresses gratitude, saying many would welcome the protagonist's decision to side with Count Magus, himself included. He explains that many guild officials disapprove of Cardinal Georgius for altering the job system. He promises to ensure the protagonist is warmly received and offers support with anything he may need. The protagonist requests a large amount of oil from the village. When questioned about the reason, he calmly reveals his intention to burn the forest. The villager panics at the idea of burning the forest, but the protagonist clarifies he only intends to burn the ogre's nest, not the entire forest. Relieved, the villager agrees to fetch the oil while the protagonist prepares for battle. Villagers bring barrels of highly flammable monster oil, and with their help, the protagonist transfers it into his magic storage. Though surprised at how it works, they assist him, making the process much more efficient. The protagonist stores all the oil with ease using his magic storage, impressing the villagers. Despite their concern about nightfall making it dangerous to leave, he explains that his night vision skill makes it even more convenient to move now. He thanks them and prepares to head out. The protagonist explains that ogres usually rest at night, making it the perfect time for an ambush, though he admits to feeling a bit concerned. After reassuring the villagers, he sets off, determined but cautious. Eldest takes off into the sky with determination, heading toward his mission. The villagers watch him leave, placing their hopes on his shoulders, and call out encouragement, trusting him to succeed. Eld arrives at the massive tree where the ogres dwell. Spotting a few guards outside, he activates his magic to search and pinpoint the enemy's positions, preparing for his next move. Eld detects dozens of ogres along with an ogre king inside the nest. Confident in his plan, he begins pouring out oil using his magic storage, preparing to execute his strategy to wipe them all out. Eld hovers in the air, releasing a massive flow of oil onto the giant tree roots where the ogre's nest lies. The liquid spreads quickly across the ground, setting the stage for his large-scale attack. Eld prepares for the next step of his plan, setting the ogre's nest on fire. As he moves swiftly through the air, he spots an ogre with a torch below. Without hesitation, he dives down at high speed, catching the monster by surprise. Eld lands a powerful punch to an ogre's face, sending it flying backward. The creature crashes hard into the ground, and its torch ignites the oil-soaked roots, causing a massive explosion of flames that engulfs the area. As the flames spread rapidly through the roots, Eld observes the fire consuming the ogre's nest. Impressed by its intensity, he He realizes the oil burns far more effectively than expected, engulfing the entire area in blazing fire. As the fire rages through the ogre's nest, Eld watches closely, knowing they'll try to escape. Soon, the ground shakes with heavy thumps as the ogres rush toward an opening, trying to flee the spreading flames. Eld prepares for their emergence, ready to strike. As the ogres rush out in panic, Eld stays calm, noting that the fire is doing most of the work without draining his mana. To create even more chaos, he throws sticky bombs into their path, trapping and disorienting the fleeing ogres as they stumble and fall into the mess. Eld summons his magic, enchanting the earth and forming a massive boulder above the battlefield. With his spell complete, he unleashes a devastating attack, bringing the enormous rock crashing down on the panicked ogres, crushing everything in its path. Eld finishes his preparations, sealing the ogres' escape route with a massive boulder. With a final push, he smashes it down, blocking the path completely and trapping the monsters inside the burning forest. Eld stands determined, now face to face with the Ogre King, realizing his true objective is to defeat this powerful foe who leads the others. The Ogre King locks eyes on Eld from afar, then rips apart the remains of his fallen comrades, consuming their flesh to grow stronger. Eld notices this unsettling transformation with a sharp, alert expression. The Ogre King unleashes a massive energy blast, tearing through the burning forest. Eld reacts swiftly, soaring into the air to evade the destructive attack, narrowly escaping its overwhelming force. Eld recalls his experience from BBO, understanding how monsters fight. Unlike the predictable lightning dragon, the Ogre King adapts his attacks to the environment. With a fierce stance, the ogre clenches the ground, preparing to unleash a devastating move. The Ogre King smashes the ground with tremendous force, sending massive rocks flying in all directions. Eld braces himself, realizing the fight will be far tougher than he expected. Eld narrowly avoids the falling debris, his face tense with determination. The Ogre King, fists clenched, prepares another crushing attack while Eld stands ready, facing the overwhelming threat head-on. The Ogre King smashes the ground, sending rocks flying, while Eld takes to the air. Gathering his mana, he conjures a powerful fireball, aiming to strike the massive foe from above. The fireball slams into the Ogre King's face with a loud explosion, but the creature only wipes away the burns, grinning menacingly as if barely affected by the attack. Eld realizes that normal attacks are useless against the Ogre King, whose strength has been amplified by the demon's poison. Despite the overwhelming disadvantage, he steels himself, revealing that he came prepared with a plan to counter this power. Using wind gliding, Eld propels himself swiftly through the air, striking the Ogre King with a direct hit. Seizing the opening, he gathers power in his hand, preparing to unleash his next decisive attack. Eld advances contra Ogre Ray. Eld defeats the Ogre King by exploiting his size and slowness, striking from the inside despite the demon's poison enhancement. Using wind gliding, he moved with great speed to dodge and surprise the enemy. With the battle won, he considers the forest matter temporarily resolved. After defeating the Ogre King, Eld notices a magic circle forming above him. Shocked, he realizes that another boss is being summoned to replace the one he just killed. From the summoning circle emerges a far stronger foe, an Ogre Emperor. Eld realizes his luck has turned, now forced to face a far more dangerous opponent. The Ogre Emperor smashes down with overwhelming strength, shattering the ground beneath him. Eld braces himself, realizing the sheer power of his new opponent. Eld quickly evades the crushing blow, leaping to higher ground. From the safety of the trees, he watches the Ogre Emperor emerge from the debris, its power undiminished. Eld realizes something is wrong. King Ogres and Emperor Ogres shouldn't appear together. Suspecting outside interference, he resolves to stop whoever is summoning boss-class monsters. For now, he focuses on the massive Ogre Emperor before him. The Ogre Emperor roars with power, unleashing a surge of energy that shakes the battlefield. Eld braces himself from above, ready to face the overwhelming force head-on. The Ogre Emperor reveals the ability to use detection magic, immediately locating Eld. With overwhelming force, the monster launches itself forward in a devastating charge. The Ogre Emperor crashes down with brute strength, shaking the ground violently. Eld narrowly evades the devastating impact, keeping his focus on countering the monster's overwhelming power. The ground beneath Eld begins to crack, forcing him to retreat quickly. The Ogre Emperor slams down with immense force, causing massive destruction as Eld looks on in shock. Breathing heavily, he steadies himself, fully aware of the overwhelming strength of his opponent. The ground rumbles as the Ogre Emperor bursts forth with explosive force, smashing through the terrain in pursuit of Eld. Eld reacts quickly, realizing the sheer destructive power of his opponent as the giant closes in with relentless aggression. Eld launches a fire arrow, aiming to engulf the ogre in flames and buy time. However, the ogre emperor quickly counters, clapping his hands to snuff out the attack, leaving Eld shocked as his plan fails instantly. The ogre, empowered by the demon's poison, grows even stronger, resembling the king ogre. Eld steadies himself, refusing to panic, and draws confidence from his game knowledge and real battle experience, ready to face the challenge head-on. Eld unleashes multiple fire arrows at the ogre emperor. The monster blocks the flames, but Eld watches calmly, a confident smile forming as he prepares his next move. Eld summons a massive pillar of flames, engulfing the ogre emperor. Though the attack doesn't deal heavy damage, it successfully restrains the monster, giving Eld valuable time to plan his next move. The ogre emperor smashes through the flames, emerging with its body still burning but unfazed. Eld is shocked as the monster grins menacingly, showing its resilience and power. Eld grows frustrated as the ogre emperor resists his attacks. While considering his options, he realizes a specific spell could turn the tide and sees a way out of the dire situation. Eld hesitates, knowing that using the spell would cost him the boss's valuable drop, but as he faces the towering ogre emperor, he realizes survival matters more than loot and steels himself to act. Eld unleashes a forbidden spell, invoking mana corrosion, filling the battlefield with a dangerous, unstable aura as he prepares to confront the ogre emperor. The forbidden spell Mana Corrosion takes effect, corrupting the ogre's mana from within and causing it to writhe in agony. Eld reflects on why such a curse is rarely used despite its devastating power. The forbidden curse has major risks. It affects everyone nearby except the caster, and it can also destroy monster drops. Normally avoided for these reasons, Eld deems it perfect for the current battle, prioritizing survival over rewards. The curse begins to corrode the ogre's body, breaking it apart. Eld explains that the spell is the ideal counter to the demon's poison, as it not only erodes mana, but also absorbs the contaminated energy that empowers the monsters. The ogre's body disintegrates under the curse, collapsing into nothing. Eld watches sharply, then notices something unexpected amid the burning surroundings. As the flames die out, Eld thinks it's time to finish things. Suddenly, the ogre, still alive despite heavy damage, charges at him with one last attack. The ogre's body cracks and burns as it struggles to hold on. Eld, confident and resolute, prepares to finish the battle, declaring the fight's end. Eld unleashes his power with full force, causing the ogre's body to crack apart violently. The beast collapses under the overwhelming attack, its strength finally broken. Breathing heavily, Eld lowers his hand, relieved the battle is finally over. He looks around at the aftermath, grateful that the fight has ended in his victory. The battle site settles as the flames die out, and the ogre's remains vanish. Eld notes the fight is finished, though he couldn't obtain the Emperor's drops. Still, with the defeat of so many ogres and their leader, he believes he can prove to the capital that the crisis has been resolved. Amid the aftermath, Eld discovers a rare stone of wisdom. Knowing the risk of losing drops due to mana corrosion, he considers himself fortunate to obtain it. With relief, he acknowledges there's still one last matter he must handle. Eld runs through the forest and activates a detection spell. The magic reveals the presence of a sinister artifact, the source of the demon's poison. Now aware of its location, he prepares to confront it directly. Eld summons an ice pillar, striking the ground with force. The frozen spike pierces through and begins sealing away the demonic poison, halting its spread. Eld confirms the monsters will calm down now that the poison is sealed. He wonders if the enemy has a method to automatically summon stronger ogres but decides not to dwell on it. Acknowledging the limits of his game knowledge, he resolves to return, ready to face whatever challenges this world throws at him. At the guild branch, the manager dozes off despite the tense situation. The staff wake him, frustrated that he could sleep while Eld is risking his life outside. He brushes it off, saying he simply nodded off, unaware of their growing concern. As morning arrives, Eld returns to the guild, surprising everyone with his sudden appearance. Exhausted but smiling, he's greeted with shock at his battered state. Concerned, they ask if he's all right, and he admits the battle wasn't fought in the cleanest of places. Eld reassures them that the threat is gone, proudly declaring he has defeated all the ogres. Overcome with relief and joy, the guild members rush forward, throwing themselves at him in a grateful embrace. Exhausted from the battle, Eld collapses, apologizing as he admits he just needs a small break. The guild members panic, calling out his name in worry, while he finally drifts into much-needed rest. Night falls, and Eld wakes up in a bed inside a wooden room, realizing he's been moved to safety. Confused, he looks around and quietly wonders where he is. Eld wakes up at the inn, realizing he had collapsed from exhaustion after defeating the ogres. A guild member enters, relieved to see him awake, explaining that he had been asleep for 2 days. She offers him food and promises to inform the branch manager immediately. Eld receives thanks from the branch manager for defeating the ogres, but before the conversation continues, a mysterious figure steps forward, addressing him directly and asking if he is Eld the Novice. Eld questions the stranger's identity, and the man introduces himself as Magis, a count from a remote region, greeting Eld politely.